If I told you that the most important question you'll ever confront is whether life is worth living, not money, success, or love. Albert Camus begins with a simple but terrible blow that makes all our daily struggles, traffic, deadlines, constant phone scrolling, feel fragile. We spend so much time looking for purpose and expecting life to guide us. Even when we listen intently, the universe is silent. No response. Camus begins his crazy philosophy with that silence, our need for meaning and the world's indifference. Also where this journey begins. This series tackles those late-night ideas we've all had, when we stare at the ceiling and wonder why, turning theory into something visceral, human, and memorable. Lean in. Join me in the topic, explaining 52 boring Camus quotes and ideas. They may appear simple, yet each teaches us how to live honestly in a world without answers. From where are you listening? I want to know, so leave a remark. If this connects with you, subscribe. It means more to me than you realize and helps me keep writing. Tell me in the comments when you last looked at the world and wondered, what's the point? How many of us have been there? There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Camus begins with the abyss, not God, logic, science, or politics, but he continues. He brings philosophy from thoughts to blood and breath in one line. The question is harsh. Why live without meaning? Instead of easing the blow, he hides the reality. He directs us in a cold, unambiguous direction. Philosophers wonder if the universe, freedom, and knowing exist. If a person has chosen to die, those questions are less essential. Camus considered suicide the most significant intellectual test. Not a sign of depression or disease. Is life worth that trouble? The sentence structure shows something important about Camus's method. No glitzy language or decorations, so rigid it's almost scientific. He speaks, not whispers. Suicide is the fundamental ethical concern. Camus eliminates any circumventions by making the question acute. He won't let us hide behind comforting platitudes. According to him, we get into the habit of living before acquiring the habit of thinking. We should sense the urgency behind our regular routines. Most people go through life without considering their behaviors. Camus doesn't want this. This quote is clever, since it's not hopeless. He opposes suicide and bases his theory on it. He begins in darkness to avoid emotional or comforting scenes. Being honest about this question and still believing in life is strong. Camus could not accept dogma, religious promises of infinite meaning, or political ideologies that sacrifice the present for utopias. If we want to progress, we must stop lying. This remark reveals Camus's tenderness, underlying his severity. Knowing life is painful makes the question of whether life is worth living vital. Instead of judging others that struggle, he puts it in the center of his thoughts to show respect. So he builds a theory for the hospital room, prison cell, or sleepless night, not the library. It is a mindset that knows suffering enough to avoid hollow phrases. From this perspective, Camus discusses the absurd, our demand for meaning versus the universe's stillness. As always, admitting that all logic fails without a reason to survive is the first step. He doesn't consider suicide a side issue because it's the entrance into contemplation. All thought begins there. Camus starts this manner to be honest about existential difficulties on every page. Don't employ cheap arguments, visuals, or conclusions. Now the table is clear. Even when there is nothing, you can live a determined, clear, and fierce life. The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world. Since the first person inquired, why, at the sky, we've been hungry. We want patterns, solutions, and a final story that centers us and explains our misery, happiness, and short existence. Not choosing hunger, the foundation of awareness, we inquire even when there's no answer. Then, what satisfies demand? Be quiet. The stars remain silent. The seasons change silently. The world doesn't explain or apologize. Camus said the ridiculous is between our plea and that blank space. Note his detailed description. Not just humans, the planet or anything in it is ludicrous. Meeting between them, conflicting objects, like flint and steel sparks, create the ludicrous. His difference matters. If the world were crazy, we might never get things in order. If we were the only insane ones, we may improve. Being silly implies changing one side won't cure it. Meaning will be needed, and the world will remain quiet. An absurdity will always exist. Despite this, Camus refuses sadness. Truth frees him. He believes, if you know there's no ultimate answer, don't look. You stop following ideas or systems that promise enlightenment, but lead you wrong. Identifying the ludicrous allows new honesty, clears the ground. Camus doesn't like cozy lies. He believes we must accept our need for purpose and the universe's inability to provide it to live an honest existence. That strain doesn't need to be solved, simply maintained. Imagine a taut fiddle string. If too loose, it doesn't produce a sound. Too tight, it snaps. Sometimes it sings. Camus feels life is lovely because of this conflict, the craving for meaning and the refusal of answers. So he writes with a peculiar steady joy, not melancholy. He doesn't submit to silence, yet he does. He leans into the argument, not faith or nihilism. Theory becomes more accessible to everyone. It can be felt without books or degrees. Anyone who has prayed into nothingness, strolled alone under indifferent stars, or questioned why, after a catastrophe, and received no response, knows absurdity. This intellectual truth may be the most universal and dear to us. Camus respects this by being honest, so his work can reach non-experts who have suffered that agony. After this realization, the chance to rebel and live without a higher court will consume him. This line has the unchangeable seed, core, and fact. Being human means wanting things the world can't provide. It's not necessary to fix the gap. It liberates us. First, accept it without comfort, according to Camus. At any street corner, the feeling of absurdity can strike any man in the face. Picture yourself at a red light. Normal life has automobiles buzzing and people moving. Then it hits you unexpectedly. The lights, people, and waiting feel odd and hollow, like it has no purpose. The homey sense fades. No one in your city knows you. When Camus says anything can go wrong, he means this. It's not kept secret in monastic silence or ambiguous argumentation. It lurks in plain sight, ready to jump out when the pattern is disturbed. Camus is cunning. For him, philosophy isn't limited to classes or coffee shops. He thinks the huge leap in understanding is for academics and anyone who has wondered, why is this happening in the grocery store? Why now? Why even? His work is fair because of this. He shows us what's happening below, not above. The way he explains emotion is odd. The German word unheimlich, meaning unhomely, describes how the world feels, both curiously close and far away. Your lifted coffee cup is mute in a universe that doesn't care. Your typical story is interrupted for a moment. The feeling usually fades afterward. The spell ends when the light turns green and automobiles accelerate up. Camus says such short flashes matter. We hide this truth out of habit. The absurd is like a street thief, quick, surprising, and bothersome. It doesn't announce itself nicely, targets you. After being attacked, you can't pretend you didn't know. You can cover it again with work, entertainment, or a routine, but you'll always remember that one time when the screen was pulled back, life continued despite your thoughts. Camus had many such experiences. He would wander along Algeria's coast and watch the waves crash the rocks, realizing that the beauty didn't provide solutions, only presence. Though he writes as an outside expert, he clearly experienced shock, disorientation, and confusion. He honors it by naming it. He says, You are not the only one who sees things this way. It's morally significant and shared by others. But notice how he said, can hit any man in the face. Violence in discourse, not a gentle push, a slap or strike. No permission is needed for absurdity. Breaks apart. That picture illustrates Camus's project's importance. Philosophy is a technique to avoid the agony of clarity, not a luxury. If spontaneous conflicts are likely to happen to us, we must learn how to handle them. This brief, almost casual remark sets the tone for Camus's thought. Absurdity is nearby, rare, and accessible. This is essential to daily living. The world may get confusing on any street corner. We must then choose. Do we run away and hide in comfort, or do we face it and live in truth? One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Stone is heavy, mountain is steep, and the gods gave us an impossible, never-ending labor. There is no break, end, or crown, only a drop, return, and another push. Most civilizations term this despair. They say foolishness crushes Sisyphus and commits him to useless repetition. Camus says, we should suppose he's pleased. Why? Only awareness matters, therefore they can't penalize it. The gods manage the work, but not his mind. Sisyphus is released from punishment when he recognizes his rock and takes it. Something meant to disgrace can be freeing. He had no hope, delusion, or future to save himself. Only the climb ahead, the sun on his back, and stone against his skin remained. Camus honors this. See how sneaky the language is. Not Sisyphus is glad. It would be lovely, he says. One must imagine. We must do it. This sentence tells us to reread the story, not describe a myth. Imagining him happy helps you fight back, thus turning despondency into resistance. Happiness doesn't mean comfort or prosperity. Here, in this scenario, clarity and persistence marry. Camus' move is bold. Westerners associate happiness with completion, immortality, and success. However, if all initiatives fail and legacies are obliterated by death, final fulfillment merely causes additional suffering. Camus believes enjoyment comes amid effort, not after. He challenges us to imagine that pushing, aware, purposeful, and hopeless can fill the heart. Imagine working daily on a job that will never be done. Caregiving for kids before they go. When artists paint, they realize the canvas can't capture all their dreams. All of these conditions reverse the project. Still, the act shines. Camus calls that glimmer bliss. The lion's tail reveals his philosophy. Rebellion is the only option if life has no significance. Existing without charm or illusion, yet nonetheless existing. This is Sisyphus' resistance. He can't change his situation, but he can hope. His knowledge alters the scene. His refusal to bow to the gods converts tragedy into victory. Thus, Sisyphus returning down the mountain is weirdly exhilarating. His face isn't unhappy as the rock waits and the ascent continues. He knows the trick is deception. Though he can't win the game, he's still free. His decision is to continue. He accepts. That choice provides you freedom. The gods cannot take away. Camus' admonition to imagine him happy is for us. We throw stones. Success doesn't terminate our lives. Instead of pretending, imagine to build a perspective that turns pointlessness into freedom. We learn to be joyful by embracing the climb and picturing Sisyphus pleased. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. Imagine a man climbing a rock. The incline in front of him never ends, and his steps are heavy. Every time he approaches the top, the road twists and turns. The rate of his rise, the tension on his muscles, and the steady pulse of his blood hint at completion. Camus meant that the fight, not the top, fills a man's heart. It goes against what most people are taught. As children, we are taught that happiness is a reward for hard work and goal achievement. We want promotion, release, praise, and ideal love to make our hard work worthwhile. Camus claims there is no final entrance. All peaks are brief breaks before the descent begins again. Death halts work, and time destroys landmarks. Whatever meaning is at the top disappears when we grasp it. So he shifts meaning. Beginning, not finish. If you attempt with open eyes and no false notions, it becomes a cause to live. The heart doesn't need to be won over. It needs to work hard and move. Being filled means going with awareness, not getting there. In his writing, Camus seems to find satisfaction in daily duties. Consider the artist who molds wood, knowing the chair would break, or the gardener kneeling, knowing winter will bear the blossoms. Like the lover cared again every morning while knowing it would take time. None of these bring long-term happiness. Their value comes from the act, the push, care, and constant care. That delights the heart. This line turns Sisyphus' story from defiance to empathy. Camus isn't telling us to resist. He's asking us to recognize adequate effort. It's good to struggle. It gives color to life. It gives hard times substance, weight, and taste. Yet days are foggy without it. A love song comes from the climb. This viewpoint is humble too. Accepting defeat involves abandoning transcendence. We must accept our smallness without anger. We don't need to be gods to dominate and immortalize ourselves. We must live fully, be conscious about each step, and let the climb fill us. This mindset saves us from the exhaustion of chasing unachievable ambitions. This Camus' remark at the end of the myth of Sisyphus feels good. He offers some peace after fighting absurdity and pessimism. No response, only a means to carry the weight. He says climbing can fill a man's heart, not victory. If we can enjoy fighting, we'll be free. Happiness and the absurd are two sons of the same earth. Camus makes them brothers. Despite their oddity, hungering for purpose, and the world's stillness can lead to absurdity and contentment, not rivals, but relatives. He wants us to view delight from the same source as foolishness, not despite it. Very strong point. Most people are happy when they found purpose, tamed the absurd, or found order in chaos. But Camus believes joy doesn't come when nonsense is gone. Seeing how stupid something is brings joy. You can be happy in a quiet environment. The way it is, what a relief to feel the sun on your face after a long winter. Laughter from buddies late at night, or the taste of ripe fruit that runs down your hand. Eternity doesn't fix these times. They don't need cosmic passes. Their speed gives them power. Though short-lived, they dazzle. Camus urges to claim them without apologies, not as fantasies but to offend. Happy people rage against the nothingness. Growth, not lack, comes to me when I hear sons of the same earth. Absurdity and enjoyment grow from it. Rain falls and sun shines. Camus's opinions are often misinterpreted, yet were genuinely positive. He wants to recognize depression and build joy, but happiness can't deceive itself. A delight that says yes, even so, to reality. This idea is humble too. You don't need enormous or eternal promises to be happy. Weak, short-lived, and local. Sharing coffee, seeing the beach, and taking a vacation from work helps you feel better. Camus won't ignore them. They will incite rebellion. We endure because of these things. Notice how he portrays happiness as the twin brother or sister of absurdity, not the reward of escape. We can't eliminate the ludicrous, but we shouldn't. A cosmos that can explain itself is unattainable. Accepting the silly lets us enjoy life. When you meet silence, life's music becomes more significant. Even small pleasures stand out against nothingness. Thus, happiness is bravery. Giving up is simple when the world doesn't answer. Still, smiling, loving, and being happy takes more guts and effort. Camus could be released by this heroic individual. Freedom to accept your condition, not to escape it. Though short, this sentence is hymn-like. Silliness makes us happier, not less. Accepting something stupid will reveal happiness's old origins. We only need to see, take, and claim it. If the world were clear, art would not exist. Camus contradicts himself. In this comment regarding art, why make things if everything was apparent? The truth was obvious, and meaning shone like the sun without shadow. He claims art is about mystery, not truth. Questions create it, not answers. Imagine a painter facing a scene. The brushstroke would be unnecessary if everything made sense. But the world doesn't want to be explained. It conceals and shows. The artist bends over the canvas and fights. Life is opaque. Therefore, poems, songs, and art try to express what words and reasoning can't. Camus said ambiguity is what makes us creative, not a defect. This is also why art and thought often coexist. Camus wrote books, plays, and articles in addition to philosophy. His stories, such The Stranger, The Plague, and The Fall, illustrate his ideals. For what reason? Thus, thoughts cannot properly represent the ludicrous. A book can show us a man burying his mother, or a doctor treating people during an epidemic, and that's how we experience the world's quiet. Art conveys uncertainty better than logic. If only the world were clear, critiques as well as explains. Camus struggles to clarify when they're not there. Religion, political utopias, and metaphysical systems claim to eliminate the need for art. They claim to explain everything. Camus disagrees. He believes these tactics kill art by eliminating doubt. Nothing remains to uncover once everything has been shown. The planet dies. Thus, art protests. The artist affirms life's ambiguity through art. They shape ideas rather than knowing everything straight immediately. This revolt is beneficial because it rewards the search rather than giving up when there are no answers. Writing a poem implies accepting the world doesn't give us meaning, but still feeling it's worth putting our experiences together. Camus's writing reflects this. His lines are perfect, but never stop. He avoids obscure words and ideas, but his clarity exposes the world. His words paint enigmatic images. His art draws us into the unknown. This short quote has two uses. It explains why art exists and its purpose. In another aspect, it reveals Camus's philosophy, why he doesn't supply final answers or plunge into mystery-solving systems. Living with absurdity is unknown. To live with uncertainty is to create. Art is what makes things beautiful, not their lack of clarity. If the world were plain, we'd just accept truth, but we're making it. We get into the habit of living before acquiring the habit of thinking. We all know we run before thinking about where we're going, but we rarely say it. School, job, and relationships become routines without asking why. Our lives are overwhelmed by existence. Hopefully we pause and think later. Definition of habit of living is apparent. Life begins with copying others, not a plan. Children copy their parents, students copy their teachers, and employees copy their bosses. Even cheerful items like birthday cakes, wedding rings, and holidays are copied. Life is a theater we act out unknowingly. Thinking follows, which Camus defines as serious thought, questioning, and approaching meaning. Habits are usually strong by then. The quote describes how astonished many adults are. One day you wake up wondering if you chose your years-long path, or if it happened to you. Were your employment, relationships, and ambitions examined? Were they inherited? Your suffering saddens Camus. He's highlighting the fragility of a life without thought. When the ludicrous happens, when the world's stillness meets our demand for meaning, habitualists have no way to protect themselves. Camus' phrase invites, not accuses. Philosophers may become caught up in life before thinking. Thinking revives life. To make thinking a habit, break from your routine and ask, do I really want this? Is life real, or am I simply cruising? Though the line's manner makes it seem less serious, it makes a significant claim. He wants people to be informed and clear-headed daily. Though easy, living without thinking is weak. Thoughts mean awareness, which implies risking pain, but also freedom. Consider how this influences your daily choices. living by habit, waking up, going to work, coming home, sleeping, repeat, makes it simple to lose time. Think about the simple things, like how coffee tastes, how tired you are, how nice a conversation is, and how absurd the commute is. Awareness doesn't eliminate repetition, but it makes it visible and selectable. Camus' subtle message of hope. It's never too late to ponder daily. Habits can be broken or changed. You may reclaim an autopilot life. Even in old age, reflection can cleanse the days. The ludicrous makes you think fast and appreciate life. Wake up sounds more like a soft push than an accusation. Do more than live. Also, think. Living and thinking together don't form a flawless life, but they make a life that's been examined and encourages honesty, joy, and rebellion. Nobody realizes that some people expend tremendous energy merely to be normal. Many people try hard to fit in, but this is typically veiled. Camus illuminates this. Finding your way in a uniform, normal environment is difficult. Rehearsing your grin in a mirror, revising your remarks, and making little modifications to your stance or wardrobe can require more energy than the work. Since the result is good, others don't notice. Their focus is on the smooth mask, not the stress underlying. Camus's insight is kind. He believes that some people struggle because the pressure to fit costs them a lot, not because they are weak or foolish. To odd, shy, anxious, hurt, or different people, normalcy is an act. All actions require practice, focus, and perseverance. Read this to understand, not judge. Camus shows us the secret force of normality to make us nicer. That quiet coworker or friend who seems guarded may be exhausted from trying to fit in. Their daily race may be what others find easy. Many psychological factors explain this finding. We need to fit in as social animals. Being excluded hurts and threatens life. We learn to level early. Camus notes that the change costs. It's difficult for some, but the cost is real. The sad thing is that it's rarely recognized. People appreciate a mask that works, not its maintenance. A subtle attack on normal is also present. Who determines normal? These criteria help whom? Normalcy is often forced on the margins by the majority. For those crushed by it, Camus feels terrible. He knew what it was like to live on the fringe of society as an Algerian, destitute, sick, and atheist. However, it might be a call to authenticity. If the mask uses so much energy, may it be used to have more freedom? Camus' revolt thesis is about not believing lies. Living without acting or appealing is difficult, but liberating. The statement may mean, don't waste your energy fitting in. Instead, focus on clarity, life, and truth. However, Camus doesn't chastise average people. He knows their motives. He continues, nobody realizes, softly, as if to concede we don't notice the silent bravery of people carrying this weight. He honors it by naming it. He assures struggling artists that their work has been seen. This seemingly random sentence leads to a life psychology. A lot of conventional looks cover extraordinary work. To grasp this is nice. You must decide whether to spend your limited efforts dressing or living without them. Seeking what is true is not seeking what is desirable. Think of Camus as a lawyer in the court of all people. Do not mix up what is true with what you wish were true, he says, as he leans across the table. The difference may seem clear, but it has been broken many times throughout history. Religions offer eternal life because people don't want to die. Ideologies offer utopias because people can't stand unfairness. Leaders tell lies to make people feel better because the truth is hard, and people accept them because they want to feel safe. But Camus's line is also an objection. Truth doesn't change based on what people want. His worldview is different from both nihilism and dogma in this way. If we only look for what we want, we will create false realities like heaven, destiny, and growth that make us feel better but aren't real. If we only look for what is true, we might feel bad or even give up. Camus, on the other hand, says that truth is the best loyalty. Want may give you sugar, but the truth gives you light. Clear thinking is important if we don't want to lie to ourselves. Take note of the language. Seeking what is true is an action that needs discipline, toughness, and a refusal to look away. That which is desirable is inactive. It only wants to feel good. Truth and pleasure may sometimes go hand in hand, but they are not the same thing. They are in danger when you confuse them. When you connect what is true with what makes you feel good, you are open to being manipulated, to lies, and to the allure of ideology. This kind of confusion has always been good for tyrants who can give appealing lies instead of hard facts. It is like a trial of ideas, and Camus calls his witnesses. To begin, science. Its results are often not what people want to hear. There is real sickness, resources are limited, and death is inevitable. But science gives us power to act by not giving in to our wants. After that, history. When people start revolutions to get what they want, they often end up in gulags and guillotines. When desire isn't checked by truth, it leads to violence. Lastly, there is the person. Everyone has lied to themselves, like when they say they are happy in a job or relationship, when they really aren't, because the truth hurts too much, but the lie always breaks down from the inside. More anger comes from the prosecutor's voice. To live honestly is to put truth before desire. That doesn't mean you should hate desire. Camus is not a hermit. He loves happiness, beauty, and love, but he says those pleasures must be based in truth, not in fantasy. Better a short-lived, fragile happiness that is real than a fake happiness that lasts forever. This line also hints at Camus's ethic of revolt. To rebel is to be clear-headed without turning to higher forces or promises of the end of the world. It means to love the world the way it is, not the way we wish it were. That love is stronger, but it also stays true. Artists paint what they see, not what they think things should be. This is their love. It's the love of a friend who tells the truth, instead of putting down others. Camus's line is like a gavel strike. It is clear and doesn't give in. Do not think that ease means truth. Don't base your life on what you want, but on what you know. Philosophy's job is not to make people happy, but to make things clear. Life's job is to stay clear without giving up. To live without lies, you have to look for what is true, even if it hurts. And you can only be truly free if you don't lie. What is a rebel? A man who says no. Camus starts with a negative. There was no whisper, no polite disagreement, just a firm no. It's not that the rebel dreams of utopias or writes constitutions. He's just a person who, when faced with humiliation or unfairness, draws a line and won't cross it. That no is where respect starts. This description is strong because it is easy to understand. Revolt doesn't need a plan, training, or power. It all starts with one act of defiance. Someone standing when told to kneel, someone speaking when told to be quiet, or someone keeping a human face against the oppressive machine. No matter how small that refusal seems, it is the seed that justice grows from. Still, Camus is careful. The rebel's no is not damage for no reason. It's not a temper tantrum or a desire for chaos. His no has a yes in it. People who say, "No, you can't make me into nothing," are also saying, "Yes, I deserve respect, and so do others." Revolt is both saying no and saying yes. It says no to things that hurt people and yes to things that make people worth protecting. This is why Camus puts the rebel above being a victim and being a tyrant. Being a victim means going through pain without being able to do anything about it. To be a ruler is to hurt people for no reason. But the rebel won't give up. He won't be embarrassed or put down, and he won't do either. His no is not the end of the world. It is a limit. It says, "This far, no further." The revolutionary tone of the line shows how Camus felt about politics at the time. When he wrote, it was after the terror of totalitarian regimes, world wars, and mass murders done in the name of high values. He didn't trust grand revolutions that said killing people for the sake of tomorrow was okay. In the name of a better future, his rebel does not kill. He fights for the flawed worth of all people who are alive right now. This idea has fire and measure. Saying no means you don't want to give up or go too far. It's to refuse to give in and to refuse to be mean by becoming what you hate. Camus says that the rebel is the one who keeps the rules in place. Without rebellion, wrongdoing grows, and without boundaries, rebellion eats itself up. The most radical thing about this concept might be how easy it is to use. Anyone can rise up. You don't need to be rich, important, or smart. To say no, all you need is the guts to draw a line. It could be a whisper in the face of rumors, a choice not to be mean, or a promise to keep someone safe. No matter how small, every act of resistance says that there is something about people that shouldn't be stepped on. What is a rebel? A man who refuses. There is a philosophy of resistance, a politics of dignity, and an ethic of unity in this short answer. Camus isn't praising resistance as a show. He's putting its roots in the simple act of refusing. He gives regular people the power to resist again and tells them to start here. Start with no. That no leads to a yes. The yes of life, the yes of community, and the yes of freedom that doesn't hurt. I rebel, therefore we exist. Camus changes the language of resistance from I to we in a single stroke. The act of refusing something by yourself, the personal no we talked about in the last chapter, grows into something bigger. But to resist isn't just to protect your own honor. It's also to find the honor of others. When I stand up to being shamed, I'm saying that no one should be humiliated. It's not fair for anyone else if I don't accept it for myself. Camus's rebel wakes up to solidarity, and solidarity wakes up to being. Take a look at how bold the phrase is. Philosophers after Descartes look to thought to explain why people exist. I think, therefore I am. In a time marked by violence and ideology, Camus offers an option. I rebel. That's why we exist. Not a single thought, but a group of people fighting back. Not vague certainty, but rebellion in real life. The chorus of protest takes the place of the lonely cogito. This sounds like music. The rebel is never by himself, even if he makes the first move by himself. It sounds like a tuning fork. When he says no, others see themselves in it, and all of a sudden there is a community, not based on ideas, but on respect. The rebel doesn't say, follow my plan for a perfect world. He tells them, join me in rejecting what hurts us. That refusal makes a base that is more stable than any ideology. Camus's choice of word, exist, is also well thought out. Rebellion doesn't mean you'll win. It doesn't get rid of the problem of pain, but it supports life and insists on being there. We exist means that we are still here, standing tall and strong, even in the worst times. That is a victory in and of itself, no matter how hard things are or how quiet the universe is. Rebellion says, we are alive, we endure, we persist together. Ethics are changed by this understanding. Morality doesn't come from heaven or from abstract ideas. It comes from the shared experience of protest. When someone says no, they invite others to join them. When people do, a community of duty is formed. It is weak, short-lived, and not perfect, but it is real. Camus keeps saying that this weak unity is enough. We do not need promises that will last forever. We need each other. It is clear that this has a political meaning. Camus reminds us that the real we of revolt has limits. This is important. In a time when revolutions often broke their promises by using we as a weapon, it supports life instead of giving up on it. It doesn't want to kill for the sake of a greater good. It finds that everyone is human and that this must not be broken, not even by the rebels. The word isn't just political though. It has to do with everyday life. This truth is lived out every time we refuse to be mean in a talk, stand up for someone who is being made fun of, or stand with someone instead of against them. I rebel, therefore we exist. Existence isn't just staying alive, it's also recognizing each other. Camus's theory is based on a shared moral code. Revolt ties us together, not through ideology, but through our shared humanity. These words don't just say something, They invite you to do something. To rebel is to discover other people. As soon as you say no, you become part of a group that celebrates life. These days, when things are broken up, Camus's words ring even more true. We are not the only ones rebelling. We live because all of us rebel together. Man is the only creature who refuses to be what he is. In this quote, Camus throws a pebble into the pond of our thoughts and lets the waves of that pebble make us feel uneasy. What does it mean to refuse to be what one is? A tree grows, a fish swims, and a bird sings. Each does what it's supposed to do without any doubt. But people, we are always rebelling against ourselves because we are restless and unhappy. We want to be more than just flesh, more than just human, more than what we can be. We make up gods, goals, afterlives, progress, and utopias to say, I'm not happy with who I am. This rejection seems like a flaw at first glance. It's almost funny. There is no other animal that wishes it were something else all day. Cats don't plan for the end of the world. A dog never thinks about how fair the world is. Only we, silly beings, fight against our situation. Still, Camus doesn't think this is silly. It's like the very core of who he is as a person. We are human because we can refuse to be what we are. There are many ways to refuse. It is the artist who refuses to believe that life has no meaning by turning paint or words into meaningful pieces. It's the lover who won't be alone and ties their life to someone else's. It's the scientist who won't accept ignorance and is pushing the edges of what we know. That's the protester who won't stand for unfairness and says no to those in power. There is an insistence on transcendence in every act, even though transcendence always fails. But Camus warns us that this refusal can also destroy us. When the desire to be better turns into an ideology, and the failure to accept our situation turns into denial of it, cruelty follows. The tyrant doesn't care about human boundaries and thinks he is God. The fanatic doesn't want to die and kills people in the name of endless life. When we refuse to be who we are, we run the risk of trying to destroy what we are, limited, weak, and free. This is the paradox. Refusing is what makes us great, but it's also what makes us dangerous. That's just what it means to be human. It's not enough to just accept things as they are. We also can't rebel so strongly that we destroy the very thing that allows us to rebel. Camus wants a refusal that knows its limits, a rebellion that supports life instead of running away from it. The line is fun because it has two edges. Being told this is both a diagnosis and a task. We are the animal that doesn't want to be what it is. What should we do with that? Do we waste our refuse on unrealistic ideas of transcendence, or do we use it to make things, help others, and stick together? Do we lie about our limits or push them as far as they can go? This way of reading the line makes it almost funny. We are silly creatures who are always unhappy and always planning how to make things better. Still, Camus hears the spark of honor in that very silliness. We refuse to be what we are, which means we refuse to accept wrong, give up in hopelessness. It gives us art, morals, and the will to rebel. Here we are again, at the beginning, with a paradox. Humanity is the thing that will not just be human. To laugh at this is to see how silly it is. To accept it is to start living clearly, boldly, and joyfully, knowing our situation and refusing to let it get worse. The welfare of the people is always the alibi of tyrants. How many times have those words been used to start a speech? For the good of the people, in the name of aid. How many laws, wars, and chains have been made? Camus's line cuts through hundreds of years of speech to show a pattern that is as old as power itself. Tyranny hides behind the mask of kindness. Tyrants never say that they rule because they are selfish or greedy. All of them say that their violence is essential, their cruelty is kind, and their restrictions are safety measures. They hide behind the people who are like a shield. Camus is very clear when he uses the word alibi. An alibi is a reason or story that is used to hide the real crime. Tyrants don't just talk about the people's well-being, they use it as proof that they are righteous. They say, "I did not kill freedom, I only acted to keep you safe. I didn't put down dissent, I just looked out for the neighborhood. I didn't shut down voices, I just kept the peace." Every act of dominance wears the clothes of care. In history, these ideas have been practiced over and over by tyrants. What makes it satirical is how expected it is. Every ideology, whether it's based on faith, nationalism, or revolutionary zeal, learns to use the same excuse. The people wanted it, the people needed it, and the people will thank us later. Camus turns down the show. He takes off the mask and shows us the truth. Oppression needs an excuse because it knows it is guilty. Nevertheless, the sentence is not only an attack on politics, it is also a warning to us. The ruled, we believe the excuse right away because it makes us look good. Everyone wants to hear that everything they do, everything they give up, and everything they obey is for their own good. Hearing that we suffer for the people's good makes us feel like we are a part of something good. Camus says that we should still be wary of this kind of praise. We should ask, for which of us, when a leader says too loudly that they are acting for us? Who gets what, and who has to pay for it? This line also makes a reference to Camus's larger idea of bounds. He doesn't disagree with government or duty. What he disagrees with is going too far, which turns necessity into dominance. Even if a leader does something for the good of everyone, the real test is whether or not it respects people's worth. When welfare is used as an excuse to take away people's freedom, when the people are thought of as ideas instead of real people, then the rationale has taken over. At that point, rebelling is not only okay, it's vital. The line is brilliant because it speaks to us all. Even though it was written after the horrible things that happened under totalitarianism, it is still relevant to democracies that are tempted by surveillance, businesses that hide their abuse behind customer care, slogans, and movements that are ready to kill people in the name of an imagined paradise. Camus tells us to pay close attention when someone in power talks about the people. Listen for the sound of an excuse. In this way, Camus protects us against being manipulated in a single sentence. He gives us a skeptical tool, a way to see through the words to the real world below. A tyrant is rarely honest with itself. It likes masks, tricks, and good words. But it's not so easy to be fooled once you know the trick and hear the excuse for what it is. Freedom is nothing but a chance to be better. First glance, freedom often looks like absence. No chains, no bars, no commands. We think of it as space cleared, obstacles removed, doors flung open. But Camus adds an insistence. Freedom is not simply released. It is an opportunity. It is a chance. And chances must be seized. Left unused, freedom is hollow. Left misused, it degenerates into chaos or selfishness. For Camus, the true test of freedom is not what it removes, but what it makes possible. The chance to be better. The phrasing here matters. He does not say freedom is better. He does not guarantee moral perfection. He says it is a chance. Freedom is an opening, a possibility, a responsibility. It lays before each of us the question, what will you do with the space you now have? A bird freed from its cage may soar or starve. A society freed from tyranny may build justice or descend into revenge. Freedom alone promises nothing. It is the chance, not the result. This perspective is both sobering and hopeful. Sobering, because it means we cannot romanticize liberty as a cure-all. Political liberation is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of harder questions. What kind of citizens will we be? How will we treat each other without a master above us? The French Revolution toppled kings only to produce guillotines. Revolutions across history prove that freedom unguided can birth new forms of bondage. Camus, writing in the wreckage of Europe's wars and ideologies, understood this danger. Yet his line is also hopeful, because it reminds us of human potential. Freedom is not only the end of oppression, but the dawn of creativity. compassion, and solidarity. It is the soil in which something better may grow, if we choose to cultivate it. The very fragility of freedom is what makes it precious. It demands care, vigilance, daily attention. To squander it on cruelty or indifference is to betray the gift. In personal life, too, the sentence resonates. To be free from a toxic relationship, from an oppressive job, from an inherited belief, these moments feel like liberation. But what comes next? Freedom is the space in which new habits, new loves, new commitments can take root. Camus warns us, if you do nothing with that space, or if you use it only to repeat old mistakes, then you remain unfree in another form. To be better, more honest, more compassionate, more alive, that is the work freedom demands. The line also reflects Camus's ethic of measure. He does not dream of a perfect society, nor a perfect human. Better is deliberately modest, not flawless, not saintly, not godlike. Better, kinder, more just, more awake. It is a small word, but it anchors his philosophy. Perfection leads to fanaticism. Improvement leads to humanity. And so the line can be read as advice from a mentor, spoken quietly, but with urgency. Do not worship freedom as an idol. Do not treat it as a guarantee. Recognize it for what it is, a chance, and then use that chance well in your own life and in your shared life with others. Because freedom is wasted if it does not bear fruit in compassion, in dignity, in creation. In Camus' view, freedom is not an end in itself, but a beginning. It is the threshold through which we step into the work of becoming better. Not perfect, not eternal, but better. And perhaps that modest demand, carried out in daily choices, is the greatest hope of all. Real generosity toward the future lies in giving all to the present. It is a paradox. We often forget the surest way to shape tomorrow is not to dream it endlessly, but to live today with fullness. Camus's sentence reads like a line of poetry, a whispered reminder against procrastination and distraction. We imagine the future as a field we can store wealth in, or a container we can fill with our intentions. But the truth, Camus tells us, is simpler and sharper. The future is fed only by what we pour into the present moment. Think of how we usually speak. I'll be happy when. Things will make sense once. Tomorrow, I will begin. We treat the present as a rehearsal, a waiting room for a real life that never arrives. Camus rejects this postponement. To defer living is to waste both present and future, because the future is nothing but a chain of presents. The only way to be generous toward it is to saturate today with energy, love, creation. This generosity is not a matter of grand gestures. It is the care you give to your work now, which carries forward in its results. It is the attention you give to a child's question, which plants seeds of trust that will flower years later. It is the courage to speak honestly today, which spares someone pain tomorrow. We do not always see the link between the present act and the future it shapes, but the link is there. Camus insists we honor it. The phrase giving all is striking. He does not say giving some or giving enough. He asks for total presence. To give all to the present is to resist distraction, cynicism, half measures. It does not mean perfection or constant intensity, but sincerity, being truly where you are, with the people you are with, in the task you are doing. To live this way is to invest fully in time itself, as if each day were both fragile and infinite. There is also a political resonance. Camus saw how revolutions often postponed justice in the name of a radiant future. Sacrifices were demanded, freedoms crushed, lives destroyed, all for the sake of tomorrow. But tomorrow never arrived. It was always deferred. Camus's line is a quiet indictment of such logic. True generosity to the future does not sacrifice the present. It dignifies the present so that the future may inherit dignity. The beauty of the sentence lies in its humility. It does not promise control over fate. It does not guarantee that giving all to the present will secure any particular outcome, but it does assure us that this is the only authentic path. The future is not ours to dictate. The present is to waste, it is to betray both. And so Camus offers this as both philosophy and practice. Stop waiting for life to begin elsewhere. Stop thinking of the future as a vault where meaning is stored. Instead, pour yourself into this hour, this work, this love, this struggle. In doing so, you are not only living now, you are gifting the future with the only substance it can ever hold. Moments lived fully, generously, without reserve. An intellectual is someone whose mind watches itself. It's a definition that sounds almost mischievous, as though Camus were poking fun at philosophers, writers, and maybe even himself. An intellectual, he says, is not someone who knows everything, nor someone with a wall of books or a collection of titles. It's simply someone whose mind has turned inward, like a mirror reflecting a mirror, a consciousness conscious of itself. There's a touch of humor here. Imagine the intellectual sitting at his desk, frowning, not at the world, but at his own frown. He thinks about the thought he just had. He analyzes his own analysis. He watches himself watching. This is the comic spiral of self-awareness, a kind of infinite regress that risks disappearing into abstraction. Camus, ever wary of illusions, keeps the definition modest. He doesn't glorify the intellectual as a hero of reason. He reduces him gently to a watcher of his own thoughts. And yet, behind the wit lies a serious point. To have a mind that watches itself is to step outside the flow of unexamined living. Most of us are carried along by impulses, habits, reactions. To watch your own mind is to interrupt that flow, to notice, why did I react this way? Why am I clinging to this belief? What story am I telling myself? That act of noticing is the beginning of philosophy. It's also the beginning of freedom. Camus knew the danger of overindulgence in this self-watching. Thought can become sterile, cut off from life. But he also knew its necessity. Without reflection, we risk being swept into dogma, ideology, conformity. The intellectual's gift is not superior intelligence, but vigilance. He does not escape error, but he is at least aware that error is possible. His mind, watching itself, can catch its own tricks. There is a democratic undertone here. Anyone can be an intellectual in this sense. It requires no degree, no salon, no recognition by others. It requires only that you watch your own mind, that you develop the habit of reflection. A mother at the kitchen table, a mechanic in his shop, a teenager walking home, all can pause, notice a thought, and turn it over. In that pause, the mind becomes both actor and observer. The line also contains a subtle ethical implication. A mind that watches itself is less likely to commit cruelty in the name of certainty. It hesitates before declaring, before condemning. It asks, am I deceiving myself? Am I sure? That hesitation is a form of humility. In an age where ideologies claimed absolute knowledge and justified terror with it, Camus prized this humility as a safeguard against violence. But perhaps the best way to read the line is with a smile. Camus is teasing the very class of thinkers to which he belonged. Intellectuals, he implies, are not gods or prophets. They are simply people whose minds cannot resist the itch of self-examination. Sometimes this produces brilliance. Sometimes it produces absurdity, but at least it produces awareness. And awareness, however modest, is a form of rebellion against sleepwalking. So what is an intellectual? Not a genius, not a sage, not an oracle, just a human being who notices their own noticing, who turns a thought over like a pebble in the hand, who keeps watch not only on the world but on themselves. It is both comic and profound, both humbling and liberating. And in Camus's philosophy, that is enough. To create is to live twice. It is one of Camus's most luminous sentences, and perhaps the most personal. For him, creation is not luxury, not decoration. It is survival. To live once is to move through the world as all do, breathing, working, loving, suffering. To create is to seize that fleeting experience, to shape it into form, and in doing so, to live it again. The painter lives twice in the brushstroke, the writer in the sentence, the musician in the chord. Creation doubles existence, preserves it, and lets us taste it anew. The phrasing is deliberate. He does not say, to create is to escape life. Quite the opposite. It is to immerse more deeply. The first life is lived in time, fragile and passing. The second life is lived in memory and form, crystallized in art. A conversation vanishes, but if it is written, it lingers. A fleeting landscape disappears with the season, but if painted, it endures. The creator captures and relives, giving the moment permanence. This insight is rooted in Camus' own practice. He was not only a philosopher, but a novelist, playwright, and essayist. His ideas were not locked in treatises. They breathed in characters and images. In The Stranger Meursault lives once in the sunlit absurdity of existence, and Camus lives again by writing him. In The Plague, the citizens of Oran suffer and resist once, and we relive their struggle every time we open the book. Camus understood, to create is not just to describe life, but to extend it, multiply it, echo it beyond its natural span. There is also defiance in the sentence. Death ends our first life, but not always our second. What is created, if it carries truth, outlives its maker. A painting, a poem, a story can reach across decades, even centuries, carrying the heartbeat of one moment into futures the artist never saw. Creation becomes rebellion against time, a refusal to let life dissolve without trace. To live twice is to say, I was here and I have left something behind. Yet Camus avoids romantic illusions. Creation is not immortality. Works fade, cultures shift, masterpieces are forgotten. But even if the second life is temporary, it is real. To write a page is to experience again what stirred you. To compose a melody is to hear again what moved you. Even if no one else ever reads or listens, the creator has lived twice, and that, Camus suggests, is already enough. There is generosity here too. To create is not only to relive for oneself, but to invite others into that doubled life. A reader of Camus feels his Algeria, the heat, the sea, the stone. Though decades and continents apart, through creation, life becomes shareable. Your second life becomes part of another's first. Art is thus a bridge, binding strangers through the common recognition of experience. This line also holds a subtle exhortation. You need not be a genius to live twice. To sketch, to write a letter, to hum a tune, to cook with care, all are forms of creation. Each is a way of crystallizing experience, of doubling life. Camus democratizes creativity. It is not only for the chosen few, but for all who choose to engage. To create is to live twice. In those 7 words, Camus hands us both a philosophy and a practice. Life is fleeting, yes, but through creation, we can deepen it, echo it, pass it along. We can live once in time and once in form, and perhaps that is the closest we come to eternity. Men must live and create. Live to the point of tears. Camus here is not whispering philosophy. He is urging it like a command, like a banner to be raised. Live, create. The words ring out as if addressed to a weary crowd in need of fire. He will not accept a life of gray half measures, a life spent merely enduring or existing without intensity. Life is not a waiting room. It is a stage, a workshop, a battlefield, a canvas. To live is to spend, to burn, to feel, and to create is to carve something from that fire so it lasts beyond the moment. Live to the point of tears. What a phrase. It does not mean melodrama, nor endless weeping. It means live so vividly that your heart is moved, that you are shaken to the edge of what words can carry. To be stirred by beauty, by love, by grief, by laughter, so deep it aches. A life anesthetized against tears is a life asleep. Camus calls us to risk feeling, because feeling is proof that we are alive. Creation for him is the companion of living. It is not optional. To create is not just for artists. It is for all who shape their world. To cook a meal with care, to raise a child, to plant a garden, to write a song, to stand against injustice, all are acts of creation. They take what is given and make it more. Creation is rebellion against death, against silence, against futility. It is life doubled, amplified, offered to others. The tone here is urgent because Camus knows the alternative: to drift, numb, through habit, to live as if one were already dead, waiting for the days to pass. That to him is betrayal, not only of oneself, but of the gift of consciousness. If we are aware, if we can see the absurd clearly, then we must also affirm it by answering with creation. Otherwise, the absurd becomes despair. This is not easy advice. To live to the point of tears requires courage. It demands vulnerability. Many avoid it because to feel deeply is also to risk breaking. Love can wound, beauty can fade, hope can be disappointed. But Camus argues that the risk is the point. Safety is not life. Only when we stand open enough to be moved to tears do we touch the depth of existence. There is generosity in this vision too. Creation does not end with the creator. It spills outward. The poem written, the kindness offered, the truth spoken, these acts ripple into the lives of others. To live to the point of tears is not just private intensity, but communal gift. A tear shed in response to beauty or compassion connects us, proves that we share something fragile and luminous. So Camus' call is both personal and universal. He speaks to the individual heart. Do not waste your days on autopilot. Live awake, live moved, live to tears. And he speaks to humanity as a whole. Do not let your world be defined only by survival and efficiency. Create together, build art, justice, solidarity, love. Men must live and create. It is a line that reads like a demand, but beneath the demand is love, for life, for beauty, for possibility. Camus is urging us not to settle for endurance, not to be cowed by the absurd. To live and create is our defiance, our dignity, our joy. To the point of tears, yes, but also to the point of truth. In the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer. Few lines from Camus shine as brightly as this one. It carries the warmth of sunlight into the coldest season, a reminder that resilience is not found in the world around us, but in the depth of our own being. Winter here is not just a season, it is a metaphor for hardship, despair, loss, the heavy silences of existence. And yet, in the core of that winter, Camus discovers something unbroken, radiant, and alive, an invincible summer. The beauty of the line lies in its tension. In the midst of winter, not after winter, not once the snow has melted, but right in the coldest, darkest moment, he finds this summer. It is not postponed, not conditional. It coexists with the cold. This is no shallow optimism that denies suffering. It is resilience that acknowledges suffering and still affirms life. Camus refuses the consolation of escape. He does not say hardship will end soon. He says even while it endures, something within me endures too. That invincible summer is not about cheerfulness or denial. It is about the capacity to resist despair, to keep a core of warmth untouched by external storms. It may be memory, sunlight over the Algerian sea that lived in Camus's bones, no matter how cold Paris grew. It may be the stubborn flame of joy that persists in small things, the taste of bread, the laughter of a friend, the light of morning on stone. It may be love, fragile yet sustaining. Whatever form it takes, it is invincible because it does not depend on circumstances. It is chosen, cultivated, guarded. The line is also an ethical call. Each of us carries winters, grief, illness, loneliness, failure. And yet, Camus suggests there is a resource inside us that cannot be extinguished if we choose to tend it. To remember beauty, to practice attention, to refuse the finality of despair. This is the art of finding the invincible summer. It is not given once and for all. It must be rediscovered, like a well that seems buried until you dig again. Politically, too, the phrase resonates. Camus lived through occupation, censorship, and violence. For him, the invincible summer was not just personal resilience, but collective endurance. Even when nations froze under tyranny, people preserved within themselves the warmth of dignity, compassion, solidarity. It was this hidden summer that allowed renewal when the winter passed. There is humility here as well. Camus does not claim to control the seasons of life. Winter comes, this is inevitable, but he does claim control over the inner response. To find the invincible summer is to reclaim agency in the face of external necessity. It is to say, the world may be harsh, but I can still affirm something unbroken within me. The lyricism of the line explains its endurance. It is quoted not just in philosophy classrooms, but at funerals, in journals, on posters, taped to walls. People recognize in it their own quiet strength, their own stubborn ability to go on. It gives a name to something many have felt, but not articulated, that even in despair, there is a core of warmth that endures. So Camus leaves us with an image more powerful than argument. Winter outside, summer within. The cold cannot kill it, the storms cannot erase it. To live with the absurd is not to deny winter. It is to find, even there, the invincible summer that makes life worth living. Autumn is a second spring, when every leaf is a flower. Camus gives us here not an argument, but an image, and in that image, a philosophy. He looks at autumn, the season of decline, and refuses to see only decay. Instead, he sees abundance, a flowering. Every falling leaf, golden or crimson, becomes a blossom. Death imitates life, ending masquerades as renewal. With this one metaphor, Camus overturns the usual story we tell about time. The line is painterly, almost impressionist. Imagine a forest in October, leaves drifting down, the ground carpeted with color, the trees blazing like torches before their extinguishing. For most, this spectacle is bittersweet, a reminder of impermanence. But Camus, lover of the Mediterranean sun, sees radiance in it. Autumn does not mourn spring. It repeats it differently. The world, in its cycle of decline, invents a second flowering. What does this mean for us? Camus suggests that change, loss, and aging need not be read only as diminishment. They can also be read as transformation. Just as autumn gives us a second spring, our own decline can reveal hidden forms of beauty. Wrinkles become records of laughter and tears. Memory becomes a kind of blossoming in the heart. What seems like an end can be lived as another beginning, if we choose to see it that way. There is also rebellion in this line. It refuses the narrative that equates value with youth, growth, and permanence. Western culture often treats aging as tragedy, decline as failure. Camus counters with poetry. Autumn is not a lesser spring, it is a second spring, one that bursts with a beauty all its own. The rebel here is not only against despair, but against cultural habits of seeing. Philosophy becomes a shift of vision, where others see loss. He insists on radiance. The metaphor also fits his broader philosophy of the absurd. If the world does not grant ultimate meaning, then meaning must be created through perspective. To see autumn as flowering is an act of imagination, a way of refusing despair in the face of inevitable change. It is not denial. Camus never denies death, but a reframing. The leaves do fall, the cold does come, but for a time, the world burns with a second spring. That moment, noticed and cherished, is enough. In everyday life, this line is a call to attention. Too often we hurry through seasons, through days, noticing only the loss, shorter evenings, colder mornings, the end of warmth. Camus teaches us to pause and look again. The streets lined with color, the trees aflame, the air sharp and clean. Each leaf is a flower, if we have the eyes to see it. Beauty is not confined to beginnings. It flourishes in endings too. Perhaps this is why the quote endures in people's memory. It is not simply about autumn. It is about life itself. To live well, Camus implies, is to find spring even in autumn, to find beginnings even in endings, to find beauty in the moment of decline. It is an invitation to gratitude, to imagination, to resilience. So let us walk into autumn, not as mourners, but as celebrants. Let us see in each falling leaf, not loss, but blossom, for the world offers us two springs, not one, and to notice the second is to double our joy. At the heart of all beauty lies something inhuman. When we look at beauty, we often expect comfort, a flower blooming, the curve of a coastline, the face of someone we love. But Camus unsettles us. He reminds us that beauty is not just softness or warmth. It contains something alien, something beyond us, something that does not bend to our desire. At the very heart of what moves us most lies what refuses us, the inhuman. Think of the sea. To stand before it at sunset is to feel awe. The light ripples, the horizon glows, the air itself seems to shimmer. And yet, beneath that beauty lurks indifference. The sea does not care for us. It will drown us as readily as it will soothe us. Its beauty is born of forces that know nothing of our longing. We call it magnificent, but it is also merciless. Camus insists that the two are inseparable. Or consider the face of a beloved. It glows with intimacy, with familiarity, with meaning. And yet, in a glance, it can become strange, other. You notice the play of muscles, the lines deepening with age, the mystery behind the eyes that you cannot penetrate. Beauty is bound up with otherness. We are moved precisely because what we behold is not ours to control. The phrase something inhuman does not mean monstrous. It means not human, not shaped to our scale of needs and values. Mountains rise, storms break, stars burn. Their beauty dazzles us, but they are indifferent to our joy or suffering. In fact, it is this indifference that gives beauty its sharpness. A perfect rose is beautiful, partly because it will wither, partly because it never asked for our gaze. Camus saw this clearly in nature. His Algeria was full of blazing sunlight, rocky coasts, wide skies. The beauty there was radiant, but it was also pitiless. The sun that warmed also burned. The sea that refreshed also destroyed. The rocks stood, mute and ancient, long before humans and long after. In beauty's presence, we are reminded of our smallness, our fragility. This is why beauty and the absurd are intertwined. Beauty awakens desire for meaning, for permanence. We want to hold it, to keep it, to make it ours. But beauty resists. Its essence lies in the fact that it does not explain itself, does not belong to us, does not last. It exposes us to the absurd, our longing colliding with silence. And yet, instead of despair, Camus finds strange joy here. Beauty wounds us, yes, but it also awakens us. It makes us feel alive precisely because it reveals the distance between us and the world. There is also an ethical undertone. To recognize the inhuman at beauty's core is to resist turning beauty into possession. Too often we destroy what we find beautiful by trying to control it, plucking the flower, conquering the landscape, consuming the object. Camus reminds us that true beauty humbles us. It asks for respect, not ownership. To let beauty be inhuman is to let it remain free. So when Camus says at the heart of all beauty lies something inhuman, he is not trying to strip beauty of its joy. He is trying to deepen it. He wants us to see that what moves us most is not ours to explain or capture. It is alien, indifferent, enduring, and precisely in that indifference, we find awe. Beauty shakes us awake, not because it serves us, but because it doesn't. It is a reminder that life, even in its most radiant forms, is not built to satisfy us, and yet we can still delight in it. I know simply that the sky will last longer than I. Camus does not shout here. He does not argue. He simply acknowledges, the sky will endure when I am gone. The clouds will gather. The stars will wheel. The sun will rise, long after my body has dissolved into the earth. This is not tragedy, not complaint, but a plain truth. I am finite. The world is not. The sentence carries humility. It resists the human impulse to place ourselves at the center of existence, to imagine that our stories anchor the universe. Against our vanity, Camus sets the vast impersonal backdrop of the sky. The stars do not dim when we mourn. The horizon does not pause when we celebrate. The world goes on. To remember this is to place our lives in proportion. Yet this recognition is not meant to humiliate us. Camus is not diminishing human worth by contrasting it with cosmic endurance. Rather, he is teaching us how to live within our limits. The sky's longevity does not erase the value of our days. It intensifies it, because we will not last. Each moment matters more, because the sky will outlive us. Our task is not to rival it, but to live fully beneath it. There is tenderness in the simplicity of the line. I know simply, not I have proven, not I believe. It is knowledge worn, like a stone in the pocket, smoothed by handling. The sky outlasts me. I accept this. No grand philosophy is needed, no metaphysical drama. It is as simple as breathing, as undeniable as sunset, and in that simplicity, there is a kind of peace. Camus, ever the child of Algeria, knew the power of the sky, the Mediterranean light, the blazing heat, the vast blue stretching over sea and desert. These were his companions. They taught him scale, the disproportion between human fragility and natural endurance. In that disproportion, he did not find despair, but wonder. To know that the sky lasts longer is to feel awe, not defeat. The line also reframes our ambitions. If the sky endures, then we need not burden ourselves with illusions of permanence. Our monuments, our empires, our achievements, all crumble. But perhaps they do not need to last forever to be worthwhile. Perhaps their worth lies in the life they embody, the intensity they hold in their brief span. The sky's permanence frees us to value the ephemeral without demanding eternity. There is also rebellion in the calmness of the statement. Many philosophies and religions have tried to deny finitude, promising that the self will outlast the sky, that souls or legacies will endure beyond death. Camus refuses these consolations. He affirms mortality without appeal to afterlife or immortality. To know that the sky will last longer than I is to accept the absurd honestly, without flinching. And yet, this honesty is not crushing, it is liberating. So what remains for us, standing small beneath that vast dome? To live, to love, to create, to revolt while we have time. To walk under the sky, not as owners but as guests. To recognize that our lives, brief as they are no less luminous for their brevity. Camus' sentence is not a lament. It is a perspective. It invites us to humility and gratitude. The sky will last longer than I, and that is as it should be. My task is not to conquer it, but to live fully under its gaze, to fill my short span with as much lucidity, joy, and compassion as I can. The sky will endure, I will not. And that contrast makes my time all the more precious. The only means of fighting a plague is common decency. The line comes from The Plague, Camus' great parable of solidarity. The city of Oran is sealed by epidemic, its people trapped in fear and grief. Doctors, priests, smugglers, bureaucrats, all struggle with what to do. In the end, Camus strips away the grandiose answers and offers something disarmingly modest. The way to fight plague, literal or metaphorical, is simply common decency. It sounds almost disappointing at first. We expect heroism, sacrifice, dramatic cures. Instead, Camus gives us ordinary effort, showing up, treating patients, cleaning wounds, organizing supplies, comforting the sick. The Dr. Ryu, his central figure, insists he is not a saint, not even especially virtuous. He is only a man doing his job. But in Camus's world, that quiet perseverance is the highest form of courage. Common decency is revolutionary because it resists spectacle. Tyranny and fanaticism thrive on spectacle, big promises, lofty slogans, grand sacrifices for abstract causes. But plagues, like most human suffering, are not conquered by abstractions. They are met by care, consistency, responsibility. Camus dignifies the humble, the nurse who stays with the dying, the neighbor who shares food, the clerk who keeps records. Decency is not glamorous, but it is effective. The phrase is also ethical. It refuses the temptation to look away or excuse inaction. During plague, many in Oran sought justifications. This is God's punishment, or fate, or something beyond human control. Camus rejects all such consolations. A plague is not a riddle to solve, it is a reality to resist. Common decency means refusing to abandon others to suffering, even when no ultimate meaning explains it. In that refusal, life gains dignity. The resonance goes far beyond epidemics. Plagues are metaphors too: war, injustice, cruelty, oppression. In each case, Camus's prescription holds. Do not wait for perfect systems or eternal solutions. Do what is needed, here, now. Care for others, stand by them, refuse to add to the harm. That is the essence of revolt against the absurd. It is striking that Camus chooses the word common. He does not praise extraordinary virtue, but ordinary humanity. Decency is not the property of saints or heroes. It belongs to everyone. It is common because it is accessible, because it can be practiced by anyone, regardless of belief or ideology. It is common because it is what holds communities together, and it is precisely this ordinariness that makes it so radical. For Camus, to invoke common decency is also to warn against cruelty justified by lofty ends. Too often, in history, leaders demanded sacrifice for the people, for the future, for the nation. Camus refuses this logic. He insists the test of any cause is whether it respects the dignity of the person before you. If it tramples them, it has failed. Decency is the line that cannot be crossed. So the sentence stands as one of Camus's clearest moral instructions. In times of plague, literal disease, or the metaphorical plagues of violence and hatred, the answer is not abstraction, but decency. Not heroics, but responsibility. Not illusions, but presence. It may sound modest, but Camus makes us see its grandeur. To practice common decency in the face of absurd suffering is no small thing. It is the essence of revolt. It is the way we affirm life against death, dignity against humiliation, humanity against the indifferent world. There are more things to admire in men than to despise. This line closes the plague, and it arrives like a breath after suffocation. We have followed Oran through months of death, fear, and separation. We have seen selfishness, cruelty, denial. We have seen indifference at its worst. And yet Camus insists, when all is told, there is more to admire than to despise. It is not a triumphal statement. It is measured, hard-won, spoken by someone who has seen too much to be naive, but also too honest to surrender to despair. The sentence itself is quiet, almost modest. More things to admire, not everything, not perfection, just more. That word more carries the weight of Camus's philosophy of limits. He does not pretend that evil is rare, that suffering is negligible, that humans are naturally good. He has watched war and occupation, watched neighbors betray neighbors, watched cruelty disguised as justice. He knows the darkness, and yet, when he weighs the scales, he finds that admiration tips the balance. What is it we admire? In the plague, it is not heroic gestures or grand speeches. It is the doctor who keeps working day after day, the volunteers who bury the dead, the families who care for one another despite grief. Camus calls this common decency, once again, the ordinary persistence of people who refuse to let suffering have the last word. These small acts of fidelity, carried out without illusions, are what make admiration possible. The line also challenges the cynicism so common in modern times. It is easy, after betrayal or disappointment, to retreat into contempt, to despise politics, despise humanity, despise the masses. Camus refuses that temptation. To live in contempt is to yield to nihilism. To live in admiration is to revolt against despair. Admiration here is not blind praise, but a deliberate recognition of what is worthy. It is a discipline of noticing, choosing to see the gestures of kindness, the quiet endurance, the refusal to abandon one another. This outlook reflects Camus's own role during the Resistance. Surrounded by cruelty and fear, he still believed in the possibility of justice and solidarity. He wrote editorials in combat, reminding readers that even in darkness, people could choose decency. His insistence on admiration, even after witnessing atrocity, was not sentimental, but courageous. It meant refusing to let evil monopolize the story of humanity. The phrase resonates today because it is both hopeful and realistic. It does not deny that there is much to despise, selfishness, cruelty, greed, but it asserts that there is more to admire: compassion, resilience, creativity, love. This balance matters. Too much optimism becomes delusion. Too much despair becomes paralysis. Camus' sentence threads the needle. It acknowledges the worst, while affirming the best. For the reader, the line becomes a challenge. Where will you look? Will you focus only on what is despicable, confirming your despair? Or will you train your attention to notice what is admirable, however small? To admire is not to excuse. It is to affirm what makes life bearable. It is to say, even in plague, even in war, even in absurdity, there is dignity worth honoring. So Camus closes The Plague, not with victory, not with illusion, but with this fragile, stubborn hope. Humanity is flawed, absurd, fragile, but still more admirable than despicable. To believe this is not weakness, it is rebellion. It is a way of resisting the cold logic of despair by holding on to the warmth of what we admire in one another. The evil that is in the world almost always comes of ignorance. Camus begins with a provocation. Evil, that most terrifying of words, is rarely the work of monsters. It is usually the work of the unknowing. We imagine evil as deliberate malice, cruelty, carefully plotted, wickedness, chosen with open eyes. But Camus insists it is more ordinary, more banal. It comes not from genius, but from blindness, not from satanic force, but from ignorance. This insight echoes the tragedies of his time. Totalitarian regimes did not function only through the will of a few tyrants. They depended on thousands, millions, who obeyed without question, who repeated slogans they did not examine, who turned away rather than face the suffering of their neighbors. The machinery of oppression was powered less by hatred than by the refusal or inability to think clearly. Ignorance, multiplied, becomes catastrophe. By framing evil this way, Camus is not excusing it. Ignorance is no shield from responsibility. To be ignorant is not simply to lack information. It is often to refuse it, to prefer ease over effort, illusion over clarity. It is to let habit or ideology do the work of conscience. The evil that results is real, even if the perpetrators never considered themselves evil. Camus demands that we recognize this. There is a moral urgency here. If evil stems from ignorance, then the antidote is not only punishment, but awareness, education, dialogue, vigilance. These are not luxuries, but safeguards. To think, to question, to resist slogans, to listen to experience. These acts become ethical duties. They are how we prevent ignorance from breeding cruelty. Camus's focus on ignorance also dismantles the comforting myth that evil is distant. If evil were the domain of demons or sociopaths, we could separate ourselves from it. But if evil grows from ignorance, then we are all vulnerable. Each time we look away from suffering, each time we refuse to inform ourselves, each time we accept lies because they are easier than truth, we risk becoming agents of harm. This recognition is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. At the same time, Camus's framing offers hope. If evil comes from ignorance, it is not inevitable. It can be reduced through lucidity, compassion, attention. We cannot abolish suffering or violence, but we can limit their spread by refusing ignorance. Small acts matter: asking questions, refusing propaganda, noticing the person in front of us. Evil thrives in darkness. Even modest light diminishes it. This idea also harmonizes with Camus's wider philosophy of revolt. To revolt is to say no, not only to injustice, but to ignorance. It is to awaken, to insist on clarity. The rebel does not need grand theories, he needs only lucidity. In this sense, rebellion is less about overthrowing tyrants and more about resisting blindness in oneself and in others. So when Camus writes that the evil that is in the world almost always comes of ignorance, he is doing more than diagnosing history. He is handing us a task. Do not be ignorant. Do not accept without questioning. Do not hide from the suffering of others. Do not trade awareness for comfort. Evil does not begin with malice. It begins with sleep. To remain awake is already to resist. Don't wait for the last judgment. It takes place every day. Camus turns the religious imagination upside down. For centuries, people have pictured a final day of reckoning, trumpets sounding, heavens splitting, souls summoned to stand trial for their deeds. Comfort is often hidden in that vision. Justice will come, if not now, then at the end. But Camus will not let us delay responsibility. The Last Judgment is not some distant spectacle. It happens every day, in the choices we make, in the lives we touch, in the dignity we either preserve or betray. The tone here is urgent, almost prophetic. Camus speaks not as a priest, but as a realist. Do not wait for cosmic drama, he says. Do not postpone accountability to the end of time. Every morning when you wake, you stand before judgment. Every action either affirms life or diminishes it. Every gesture is already weighed in the balance of human experience. This insistence brings morality down to earth. Instead of abstract commandments or deferred justice, Camus places the burden here, now. The worker who cheats his neighbor, the politician who lies to his people, the friend who betrays trust, none must wait for a fiery tribunal. The judgment is immediate, written in the consequences of their actions, in the harm they leave behind. Likewise, the one who acts with decency, who helps, who speaks truth, their judgment is already in the gratitude of those around them, in the small good they have preserved. By rejecting a final reckoning, Camus also removes excuses. How often do we hear, history will judge us, or God will sort this out, or one day, justice will be done? Such phrases relieve us of urgency. But Camus insists that justice is not a future event. It is a present practice. If you want the world to be just, you must act now. If you want meaning, you must create it now. Waiting for the last judgment is another way of refusing responsibility. There is rebellion in this view. By saying the last judgment is daily, Camus takes morality out of the hands of fate or divinity and returns it to human beings. It is not God who condemns or acquits us. It is the consequences of our choices. It is the look in another's eyes, the wound we heal or inflict, the solidarity we build or destroy. In this sense, the line is both terrifying and empowering. We cannot hide behind tomorrow, but we also do not have to. Every day gives us another chance to live truthfully. The imagery of judgment may sound heavy, but Camus's point is not to burden us with guilt. It is to awaken us to freedom. If every day is judgment, then every day is possibility. We are not trapped, waiting for some final verdict, carved in stone. We are writing the verdict ourselves, in how we live, moment by moment. So the line should be read as both warning and encouragement. Do not postpone your life, Camus says. Do not imagine that justice will arrive later. It is already arriving, in small doses, in the texture of your days. If you are dishonest, the rot begins now. If you are decent, the light begins now. Every day is court. Every act is testimony. Don't wait for the last judgment. It takes place every day. Camus makes morality immediate, responsibility unavoidable, and dignity possible. The gavel falls each day with the sun, and the sentence is nothing other than the life we are building. Step by step, truth, like light, blinds. Falsehood, on the contrary, is a beautiful twilight that enhances every object. Camus likens truth to light, but not to the gentle light of dawn. He means the dazzling light of midday, so fierce it makes you squint, so strong it erases detail. Stand too long in full sun, and you cannot see it all. That is the paradox of truth. When it comes to us raw and unsoftened, it overwhelms. It strips away illusions. It exposes fragility. It forces us to face ourselves without disguise. Truth burns. Falsehood, on the other hand, is twilight. It softens the edges of things, paints them in flattering colors, gives them shape and charm. Think of how twilight makes even the ordinary street look beautiful. Shadows lengthening, colors warm, imperfections blurred. Falsehood works the same way. It dresses up reality, offers consolation, makes the unbearable seem tolerable. It tells us we will not die, that suffering has a purpose, that history bends automatically toward justice. Lies flatter the eye. Camus' metaphor here is deliberately uncomfortable. It suggests that truth may be harder to live with than lies, that honesty can feel like punishment while illusion feels like grace. No wonder, then, that people so often choose twilight over noon, myth over clarity. Falsehood enhances, truth blinds. The temptation to choose comfort over lucidity is ancient and persistent. But Camus is not praising twilight. He is diagnosing its seduction. He knows how easily we drift into lies, because they are gentle, because they beautify the unbearable. Yet he insists that to live authentically means choosing light, even at the cost of blindness. Better to stumble in truth than to glide smoothly through illusion. The discomfort of lucidity is the price of dignity. There is also irony in the metaphor. Twilight may be beautiful, but it is fleeting. Soon the night comes, and all objects vanish. Lies may enhance, but they cannot endure. The sun of truth, by contrast, will rise again, fierce and unyielding. To rely on falsehood is to live in borrowed light. To face truth is to anchor yourself in what does not depend on illusion. This sentence also illuminates Camus's style of philosophy. He refuses both the comfort of dogma and the despair of nihilism. He accepts that truth is painful, sometimes even blinding, but he also suggests that learning to live in that brightness, without retreating into twilight, is the task of revolt. Revolt is nothing other than learning to keep one's eyes open in the glare, resisting the temptation to soften it with false consolations. In daily life, the metaphor is easy to recognize. Think of the truth about mortality. It blinds us at first on the certainty that our lives will end, that everything we love is fragile. No wonder people invent myths of immortality. They are twilight, soothing the sharpness of death. But Camus would rather we endure the glare. Only in accepting death can we live fully, loving the fragile precisely because it is fragile. So this short line, poetic and unsettling, becomes a kind of test. Will we choose twilight, lies that flatter, illusions that soften? Or will we endure the midday sun, even if it blinds? Camus urges the latter, because only there, in the unsoftened glare of truth, can freedom and authenticity take root. Twilight may be beautiful, but it is borrowed. Truth alone, however harsh, is our ground. I open myself to the gentle indifference of the world. This is one of the most haunting and tender lines in The Stranger. Piersalt, condemned to death, sits in his cell and faces the inevitability of his end. He no longer clings to illusions of reprieve, nor does he invent meaning where there is none. Instead, he opens himself to what? Not to comfort, not to justice, not to cosmic purpose, but to the world's indifference, and he calls it gentle. At first, the phrase seems contradictory. How can indifference be gentle? We usually imagine the indifferent world as cruel, hostile, cold. Yet Camus reminds us that the world is not against us. It simply is. The sun shines, the sea churns, the sky extends, without hatred, without love, without plan. Its indifference does not crush him. It soothes him. He finds relief in recognizing that the universe does not conspire for or against him. It simply exists, and he, briefly, exists within it. This acceptance is not resignation, but liberation. When Piersalt opens himself to the world's indifference, he stops demanding answers. it cannot give. He stops struggling against the absurd. In that surrender, he finds peace. The indifference is gentle, precisely because it frees him from the burden of expectation. He no longer needs the universe to justify his life. He can justify it himself by the intensity with which he lives his final days. There is something intimate about this realization, as if Camus were confessing a secret he has learned only through suffering. We spend so much energy hoping the world will explain itself, that tragedy will reveal its purpose, that joy will last forever, that justice will prevail. But what if we let go of that hope? What if we opened ourselves instead to the silence, not as cruelty, but as clarity? In that silence, Camus suggests, we may find not despair, but tenderness. The word opened matters too. It implies vulnerability, a willing exposure. Meursault does not harden himself against the world. He softens, releases resistance, lets the world in. This openness is what allows him to experience beauty, even as death approaches. He feels the warmth of the night air, hears the distant cries of the world, and finds himself strangely aligned with it. Life and death are no longer enemies. They are part of the same indifferent whole. For readers, the line offers both discomfort and comfort. Discomfort, because it denies the consolations we crave, that the world loves us, that it will reward us, that our suffering has meaning. Comfort, because it lifts from us the impossible demand to wrest meaning from silence. We can, like Meursault, open ourselves to the world as it is, indifferent, yes, but also beautiful, vast, alive. In this way, the line embodies Camus's entire ethic of revolt. To revolt is not to escape absurdity, but to face it without illusions, to live fully within it. Meursault's final acceptance is the clearest expression of that ethic. He does not flee into faith or despair. He opens himself to the world's indifference, and in doing so, he discovers a freedom that even death cannot take. So what begins as a confession of indifference becomes, paradoxically, a hymn to life. The world may not care, but we can. The world may not love, but we can love within it. Its indifference may be gentle, but our revolt can be fierce, and together, that is enough. Capital punishment is the most premeditated of murders. The line sounds like a verdict, delivered with the authority of a judge striking the gavel. Camus does not hedge or soften. He calls the death penalty what it is: murder. Not just murder, but the most deliberate kind, the kind prepared in advance, sanctioned by law, planned with paperwork and procedure. When the state kills, it does so not in passion or frenzy, but in cold calculation. And to Camus, that makes it more guilty, not less. His choice of words, the most premeditated, is devastating. Ordinary murders, however horrific, often spring from rage, despair, greed. They are acts of weakness, eruptions of human fallibility. But the death penalty is different. It is scheduled, announced, rehearsed. The prisoner waits, knowing the hour, watching the machinery of death move, step by step. Camus emphasizes the cruelty of that premeditation, the slow stripping of hope, the calendar marked with doom. The state commits its crime, not in the shadows but in daylight, with signatures, uniforms, rituals. By framing it this way, Camus dismantles the usual justification. That execution is justice, a moral act defending society. He flips the argument. If justice means anything, it cannot mean mimicking the very crime it condemns. To kill a murderer, in order to prove that killing is wrong, is a contradiction so glaring that Camus refuses to let us look away. It is hypocrisy, elevated to policy. There is also the question of deterrence. Governments often claim that executions prevent further crime, that the spectacle of punishment frightens others into obedience. Camus rejects this as both false and immoral. False because history offers little proof that executions prevent crime better than imprisonment. Immoral because even if deterrence were real, it would mean sacrificing one human life as an example to others. reducing a person to a tool, an object. For Camus, this instrumentalization of life is intolerable. In his essay, Reflections on the Guillotine, Camus brings the argument down to its human core. Imagine the condemned, wading through appeals, nights spent in terror, the endless anticipation of the blade or the bullet. This is torture, stretched over months or years. Society does not merely kill. It forces the condemned to die again and again in imagination before the final moment arrives. No other punishment is so cruelly multiplied. That, too, is part of its premeditation. Camus is not naive about crime. He does not excuse murder, nor does he underestimate the suffering of victims. His compassion extends to them fully, but he insists that the state cannot heal a wound by inflicting another. True justice must protect society while refusing to reproduce the very violence it condemns. That is why he supports life imprisonment as the harshest but most humane punishment. It prevents further harm without crossing the moral line of deliberate killing. The brilliance of the line lies in its clarity. Camus does not hide behind statistics, abstractions, or legalese. He names execution for what it is: murder, intensified by its calculation. By naming it, he strips away the aura of legitimacy that governments try to place over the scaffold. He exposes the act beneath the robe. He exposes the act beneath the robe. He's not Maquez calls capital punishment. He demands that we see through the ritual to the act itself. We recognize the contradiction of killing in order to forbid killing, and he asks us, Mother died today, or maybe yesterday. I can't be sure. It is one of the coldest beginnings in modern literature, and one of the most misunderstood. Readers often recoil. How can a son speak of his mother's death with such detachment, such vagueness? But that detachment is precisely Camus's point. In this flat voice, without ornament, without sentiment, he introduces us to Meursault's world, a world stripped of the illusions we normally use to cushion ourselves from reality. The style is brutal in its simplicity. No long sentences, no metaphors, no grief-laden outpouring, just the bare fact, Mother died today. Then, almost casually, a correction, or maybe yesterday, I can't be sure. This uncertainty shocks us, because we expect clarity around death, the most sacred of events. We expect rituals of mourning, words of love, gestures of solemnity. Instead, we are handed ambiguity, boredom, inconvenience. Camus is not mocking grief. He is revealing the absurdity of expecting reality to follow our scripts. Meursault is not heartless. He is honest. He feels what he feels, tired from travel, annoyed by formalities, distracted by the heat. Camus forces us to confront how much of what we call grief is performance, habit, social ritual. Meursault refuses to perform. He refuses to lie. That refusal alienates him from society, which demands proper gestures, but it also makes him one of Camus' clearest illustrations of the absurd hero, a man who reports life as it is, not as it is supposed to be. The line also sets the tone for the novel's investigation of meaning. If even the death of a parent is met with uncertainty, what then of love, justice, morality? The novel unfolds as a series of refusals. Meursault refuses to pretend feelings he does not have, refuses to fabricate reasons for actions, refuses to claim faith in God at the end. Society condemns him not only for murder, but for his indifference, his unwillingness to cloak reality with acceptable illusions. There is something terrifying in this honesty. If we cannot rely on rituals or conventions to give meaning to death, where do we turn? Camus's answer is nowhere beyond ourselves. The universe does not provide consolation. The absurd lies in that collision between our craving for order and the world's silence. Meursault embodies this collision in his very first sentence. And yet, beneath the chill of the line, there is a kind of strange freedom. By admitting uncertainty, Meursault liberates himself from false precision. He does not claim to know more than he knows. He accepts ignorance, boredom, even emotional blankness. That acceptance may make him appear monstrous, but it is also, in Camus' view, a form of authenticity. The genius of the opening is that it unsettles us immediately. We expect literature to invite us in with warmth, to mirror our values. Camus denies us that comfort. He confronts us with a character who does not behave as we would like, who does not say what we want him to say. In doing so, he forces us to ask whether we ourselves live honestly or merely according to convention. So when we return to the words, "Mother died today," or maybe yesterday, "I can't be sure," we hear more than indifference. We hear the crack of a philosophy breaking through. Life does not bend to our rituals. The world does not pause for our grief. Meaning is not given, it must be made. And if we dare to live as honestly as Meursault does in this first sentence, we may discover both the terror and the freedom of the absurd. I had only a little time left, and I didn't want to waste it on God. At the end of The Stranger, Meursault sits in his prison cell, condemned to die. A priest comes to him, offering the usual comfort: God, salvation, eternity. This is the moment where many would grasp at faith, desperate to escape the terror of mortality. But Meursault does the opposite. He refuses. He says he has little time left, and he will not squander it on illusions. He prefers the silence of the universe to the false promise of heaven. The tone here is not bitter, but defiant. Meursault does not curse God, nor does he rage against the priest. He simply says no. His time is too precious, too short, to be spent bargaining with fantasies. He wants the truth, however harsh. Death is coming, and it is final. The absurd cannot be erased by prayer. And so, in this refusal, he claims his freedom. This moment crystallizes Camus's philosophy. To live authentically is to refuse the leap into metaphysics, the leap into stories that promise ultimate meaning. It is to accept the absurd without denial. For Meursault, to pray would be to betray his lucidity. It would be to surrender the clarity he has fought to keep. Better to face death with open eyes than to close them for comfort. There is also urgency in the line, "A little time left." It reminds us how fleeting life is, how easy it is to waste what little we have. Camus uses Meursault's voice to expose the temptation to spend our lives elsewhere, in future dreams, in afterlife promises, in the arms of abstractions. But if life is short, then it demands our presence here and now. To waste it on fantasies, especially at the edge of death, is to abandon the only certainty we possess: existence in this moment. Camus is not mocking those who believe. He is insisting on honesty for himself. He knows that faith can be consoling. He knows that many people find meaning in God. But for him to accept God at the end would not be faith. It would be fear. And Camus's ethic of revolt is built on courage. The courage to accept finitude without appeal. In Meursault's rejection of God, we see the raw form of that courage. This line, then, is both personal and universal. It is personal in that Meursault speaks for himself. He does not want to waste his time, but it is universal in what it teaches us. Life is brief, and the temptation to waste it on illusions is strong. Each of us must decide what to do with the little time we have. For Camus, the highest form of integrity is to spend it lucidly, awake and present, even if that means confronting the absurd with nothing but our own strength. So the sentence reads like a manifesto in miniature, a rejection of false hope, an embrace of the finite, a declaration of freedom at the edge of death. I didn't want to waste it on God. The words are stark, almost brutal, but within their starkness lies a strange serenity. Meursault dies not with illusions, but with truth. And in Camus's world, that truth, clear, harsh, undeniable, is the only soil in which true dignity can grow. There is no fate that cannot be surmounted by scorn. This is Camus, at his most defiant, hurling a challenge at destiny itself. Fate, death, suffering, absurdity has always been portrayed as an undefeatable enemy, a chain binding us to inevitability. But Camus says no. Fate may not be changed, but it can be scorned, and in that scorn lies victory. The line crackles with rebellion. Imagine a condemned man walking to the scaffold, refusing to lower his eyes. Imagine a worker facing endless monotony, still finding laughter among comrades. Imagine Sisyphus pushing his stone, smiling as if to mock the gods who condemned him. These images are the embodiment of Camus's scorn. It is not denial of fate, nor is it resignation. It is contempt, a refusal to grant fate the dignity of our submission. Scorn is a weapon of the powerless. When you cannot alter the outcome, you can alter your stance. You can look your enemy in the eye and declare, "You will not have my spirit." Death will come. Yes. Suffering will visit. Yes. Absurdity will persist. Yes. But none will conquer the inner freedom of defiance. This is the philosophy of revolt, distilled to its sharpest point. There is fire here, but also clarity. Camus does not pretend that scorn erases suffering. The body still feels pain, the heart still breaks, but scorn transforms the experience. By mocking fate, we rob it of its authority. We live on our own terms, even if those terms last only a moment. The gods may laugh at us, but we can laugh back. This laughter is not shallow. It is born of lucidity. Only when you see your situation clearly, its inevitability, its absurdity, can you truly scorn it. The deluded cannot scorn. They can only hope. Hope is a kind of submission, an expectation that fate might relent. Scorn is stronger. It does not beg. It stares into the face of necessity and spits back, "I see you, and I will not kneel." Consider the historical context. Camus wrote during an age when fate often took the form of occupation, oppression, mechanized death. Many surrendered, others collaborated, but some resisted, not always with arms, but with spirit. To refuse to give in, to scorn the power that claimed inevitability, was itself a form of victory. This sentence carries the echo of that resistance. In everyday life, the line can guide us too. Illness, failure, aging, all are forms of fate. We cannot prevent them entirely, but we can decide how to meet them. We can meet them with fear or with scorn. To scorn is not to deny, but to confront without surrender. It is the dignity of the terminally ill person who jokes with friends, the exhausted worker who still sings on the way home, the aging soul who greets each wrinkle with irony instead of despair. So the line is not only a cry of rebellion, it is a manual for living. When you cannot win, you can still resist. When you cannot escape, you can still scorn. And in that scorn, you discover freedom more profound than victory. There is no fate that cannot be surmounted by scorn. The words ring like a sword striking stone. They remind us that though fate may control the outcome, we control the stance. And sometimes, the stance is enough to turn defeat into triumph. There is no sun without shadow, and it is essential to know the night. Camus here writes in images, not arguments. The sun and the shadow, the day and the night. They are not metaphors chosen at random. They are conditions of each other. Without the shadow, we could not perceive the sun. Without the night, we could not cherish the day. He is reminding us that the very experiences we call light, joy, or beauty only become meaningful because they stand against darkness. The line carries the same lucidity as his philosophy of the absurd. Happiness cannot exist without sorrow, clarity without confusion, hope without despair. To want only the sun is to want illusion, a flat world with no contrast. To know life as it is, we must know both. Camus's insistence on essential is crucial. The night is not accidental, not a flaw. It is necessary. Without knowing the night, loss, grief, the silence of the world, we cannot truly grasp what the sun offers. This is not the pessimism of someone resigned to suffering. It is the realism of someone who has chosen to live without illusions. Camus does not ask us to love the night for itself, nor to wallow in darkness. He asks us to acknowledge it, to accept that it is woven into the fabric of existence. To pretend otherwise is to deceive ourselves. To know the night is to live truthfully, and only truth can support authentic joy. Think of the way shadows give depth to a painting. A canvas washed entirely in light is flat, unbearable to look at. But with shadow, the figures emerge, the details sharpen, the beauty becomes vivid. Our lives work the same way. The struggles, the limits, the inevitable end, they cast shadows that make our moments of light sharper. The laughter with friends, the embrace of a lover, the relief after hard work, all are intensified because we know the night waits at the edge. Camus himself lived this tension intimately. Tuberculosis threatened him with early death from his youth. War surrounded him. Occupation forced him into resistance. He knew night as more than metaphor, and yet precisely because he knew it, he cherished the Algerian sunlight, the sea, the warmth of human connection. For him, light was never taken for granted. It was earned by passing through darkness. This sentence is also a critique of easy optimism. Cultures and ideologies often promise a world of endless sun, a utopia without shadow. Camus sees danger in that promise. It denies reality and tempts people into fanaticism. When shadows appear, as they inevitably do, the optimist turns to lies or violence to erase them. Camus's wisdom is humbler. Accept the night, and you will not be destroyed by it. In personal life, this means we must allow ourselves to grieve, to doubt, to face despair. Denial only deepens suffering. But when we allow the night its place, we also open ourselves to genuine joy. Knowing that sorrow is real makes laughter more precious. Knowing that death is certain makes love more urgent. The sun and the shadow, together, make life radiant. So this sentence, half poem, half truth, distills Camus's ethic. To live fully is to accept both day and night, both light and shadow. We cannot have one without the other, and we should not want to. To know the night is not to despair, but to prepare the ground for joy. For only then can the sun, when it comes, truly warm us. The realization that life is absurd cannot be an end, but only a beginning. Camus does not allow us to linger in despair. To see life as absurd is not to fall silent, not to withdraw, not to end the story. It is to begin. The absurd is a shock. Yes, the clash of our hunger for meaning with the world's indifference. But it is also a spark. The fire starts here. This line is written like a command to rise. Many thinkers before Camus had looked at the absurd and called it final. Nihilism, futility, resignation. If the world has no ultimate reason, then nothing matters. But Camus refuses that conclusion. To discover that life is absurd is not to arrive at a dead end. It is to arrive at a threshold. Beyond it lies the possibility of revolt, freedom, and passion. The word realization matters. It implies clarity, the piercing moment when illusions fall away. That moment can be terrifying. You recognize that the universe will not explain itself, that no higher order guarantees justice, that no eternity rescues you from death. Many people, faced with this, leap back into comforting lies. They cling to God, ideology, or utopia to escape the silence. Camus insists we resist. We must hold the realization, not abandon it. Only then can the beginning occur. And what beginning? The beginning of authentic life. A life no longer built on false hope, but on presence. A life that does not wait for tomorrow to justify today, but throws itself into the fullness of experience now. To live absurdly is not to live hopelessly. It is to live honestly, intensely, awake. The energy in this line comes from Camus' conviction that clarity is liberation. If nothing is guaranteed, then everything is possible. If there is no fixed meaning, then we are free to create meaning. If no eternal judge weighs our lives, then we bear responsibility for ourselves and each other. The absurd does not crush freedom, it gives birth to it. The beginning is freedom without illusions. There is also rebellion here. To treat the realization of absurdity as an end is to let despair win. To treat it as a beginning is to revolt against despair. It is to stand in the face of silence and say, I will live anyway. I will create, I will love, I will act without appeal to eternity. This revolt is not a temporary burst, but a daily discipline. Each morning, each choice becomes the beginning again. The tone is urgent because Camus wants to shake us out of paralysis. He knows the danger of lingering too long in absurdity, the temptation of suicide, literal or philosophical, but he refuses to let absurdity be the last word. He transforms it into the first step of a new life. Only a beginning, the phrase denies closure. The absurd is not the wall, it is the doorway. So this sentence becomes a call to action. To those who feel despair, it says, you are standing at the threshold of freedom. To those who feel the silence of the world, it says, begin here. To those who see life's futility, it says, let that be the spark, not the end. Camus's genius lies in this transformation. He does not erase absurdity. He elevates it into the soil of life. Realization becomes rebellion. Silence becomes possibility. Death becomes urgency. And life, stripped of illusions, begins again. This time, truly ours. In order to cease being a doubtful case, one has to cease being. That's all. It is one of Camus' most biting lines. Tucked into The Fall, a novel that exposes the vanity of judgment. We spend our lives, he suggests, trying to prove ourselves, trying to become undeniable, respectable, pure in the eyes of others. We want to cease being a doubtful case, but here comes the twist. The only way to escape doubt entirely is to stop living. Death alone ends ambiguity. Until then, we remain a mixture, guilty and innocent, weak and strong, admirable and ridiculous. The irony is sharp. Camus is laughing at our craving for final verdicts. We imagine that, with enough effort, moral effort, professional effort, spiritual effort, we might someday rest secure in judgment. But life refuses us that satisfaction. We are always in flux, always contradictory, always subject to multiple readings. One person calls you kind, another calls you selfish, one calls you brilliant, another calls you foolish. Which is true? All of them, and none. That is why the line stings. If you want absolute clarity about yourself, Camus says, you must die. Only then will your case be closed. The living cannot escape doubt. They are still becoming, still changing, still judged differently in every moment. The tone here is satirical, almost cruel in its honesty. It echoes the voice of Clemens, the confessional narrator of The Fall, who mocks both himself and his listeners. He strips away illusions of moral purity and confronts us with hypocrisy. We want to believe in stable identities, but in truth, we are slippery. Today's virtue becomes tomorrow's vanity. Today's generosity hides yesterday's selfishness, and no amount of self-justification can erase the ambiguity. There is a deeper philosophical edge too. Camus is critiquing not only individuals, but systems of judgment. Religions promise ultimate clarity in the Last Judgment. Ideologies promise to sort heroes from traitors. Courts pretend to deliver final verdicts on a person's worth. But Camus dismantles all of it. As long as someone is alive, they remain a doubtful case, capable of change, contradiction, surprise. To judge absolutely is to commit a kind of murder, to freeze someone into a single identity before their story is done. This recognition can feel unsettling. We want clean lines, not ambiguity. But Camus insists that ambiguity is part of being human. To be alive is to be incomplete, unresolved. The craving for final certainty, for yourself or others, is a craving for death, whether literal or symbolic. And yet, the line is not only mocking, it contains a kind of liberation. If you accept that you will always be a doubtful case, then you are freed from the impossible burden of perfection. You need not strive to be pure, unassailable, fixed. You can live, experiment, change, contradict yourself. You can let judgment fall where it may, because judgment is provisional anyway. So Camus gives us this truth with a smirk. Do you want to cease being doubtful? Then cease being die. Otherwise, accept doubt as your companion. Accept that your life will never be resolved, never be beyond criticism, never be stamped with a final seal of approval. To live is to be questioned, and to endure that questioning without fleeing into illusions, that is the task of lucidity. Martyrs must choose between being forgotten, mocked, or made use of. As for being understood, never. It is a bitter line, almost cruel, and yet Camus delivers it with the cool precision of someone who has studied history and found its verdict consistent. Martyrs, those who suffer or die for a cause, do not control how their sacrifice is remembered. Once they are gone, their meaning belongs not to them, but to those who survive. And the survivors, Camus reminds us, rarely offer understanding. They offer forgetting, mockery, or appropriation. To be forgotten is the most common fate. Countless martyrs vanish into anonymity, their names erased, their acts swallowed by time. A few records remain, a rumor, a grave. Their courage dies with them, unseen, unsung. Camus names this forgetting as the silence of history, the indifference of the world to even the most fervent sacrifice. To be mocked is the crueler fate. The martyr's act is twisted into folly. Their suffering is called fanaticism, their courage naivete. The very society they sought to serve ridicules them as dreamers or fools. Camus's irony here is sharp. Those who give their lives for dignity are often rewarded with contempt, and then there is being made use of. This is the fate of the famous martyr. Their image is seized, polished, and turned into a symbol for causes they might never have supported. Their words are quoted selectively, their lives simplified into propaganda. They become saints of ideologies they did not believe in, weapons in the hands of those who distort their truth. Camus knew this danger well. He had already seen how revolutionaries of one era were sanctified by the next, stripped of their contradictions, their humanity flattened into a slogan. And what of being understood? Camus dismisses it. Never. The martyr cannot control interpretation. Once dead, they cannot defend their intentions. Even if their words are preserved, they are read through the lenses of new times, new needs, new distortions. To be fully understood is impossible, because understanding requires presence, conversation, nuance, all of which end at death. The tragedy is clear. Martyrdom, often thought to secure immortality, secures only distortion. The one who dies for a cause pays the price of their humanity. They are turned into an abstraction. Their sacrifice may inspire, yes, but it will never be seen for what it truly was. Yet Camus does not write this only as lament. There is a lesson hidden in the harshness. If martyrdom guarantees neither glory nor understanding, then one must not seek it. To die for a cause is not to guarantee justice, nor memory, nor clarity. The only justification for such sacrifice must be the act itself, the integrity of refusing injustice in the moment without hope of reward. Camus's ethic of revolt always returns to this act, because the act is right, not because history will understand you. The tone of the line is elegiac, but also liberating. It strips away illusions. Do not die for remembrance. Do not live for approval. Do not sacrifice yourself in the hope of being perfectly understood. Those hopes will betray you. What remains is the purity of the gesture itself, the refusal of oppression, the insistence on dignity, the solidarity with others. That act may be forgotten, mocked, or used, but in the moment it is chosen, it is true, and perhaps that is enough. To live and to die with lucidity, without illusions, is the only immortality Camus allows. Not in memory, not in history, not in understanding, but in the integrity of the act itself. God is not needed to create guilt or to punish our fellow men suffice, aided by ourselves. It is a sentence that cuts religion down to size. For millennia, humanity has imagined divine judges, cosmic scales, eternal courts in the sky. But Camus insists none of this is necessary. We do not need God to feel guilty. We do not need divine wrath to be punished. Human beings do it well enough, sometimes too well. Society, with its laws and customs, its gossip and condemnation, supplies more judgment than any deity could. And even when society is silent, we punish ourselves. The insight is brutal in its simplicity. Every one of us carries within us an inner tribunal. We replay our mistakes. We hear the imagined voices of others. We feel shame even when no one is watching. Our consciences, shaped by culture and memory, whip us harder than any god. You need not fear lightning bolts from heaven. The real punishment is the sleepless night, the sudden flush of shame, the weight of unrelenting self-judgment. Camus is also exposing how power works in human communities. We are policed less by divine law than by social eyes. The sideways glance, the whisper, the cold shoulder, these are punishments as old as the village. Every culture invents ways to enforce guilt, to ensure conformity, to keep individuals in line. God may be invoked, but he is not required. Our fellow men suffice. In fact, their judgment often feels harsher because it is immediate, embodied, inescapable. And then there is the cruelty of self-punishment. Even when no one condemns us, we condemn ourselves. A harsh word we regret, a failure we cannot erase, a betrayal we cannot undo, we carry these like stones. Camus knew the psychology of guilt well. Unlike divine punishment, which is imagined to end after confession or penance, self-punishment can last a lifetime. In this sense, the phrase "aided by ourselves" is chilling. We are our own executioners, replaying guilt until it becomes part of our identity. But the line is not merely descriptive, it is critical. Camus is showing us how easily guilt is weaponized. Leaders, ideologies, and systems of power exploit our tendency to judge and punish one another. They do not need to rely on God's authority when they can rely on our own fear of exclusion, our own readiness to condemn, our own talent for shame. The machinery of judgment runs on human fuel. Philosophically, this is part of Camus's rejection of transcendence. If guilt and punishment are human creations, then morality is human too. We cannot escape responsibility by appealing to heaven. We cannot say, "God made me guilty." No, our guilt is born from our actions, from our conscience, from our communities. That realization is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying, because it means we bear the full burden. Liberating, because it means we can also resist, reshape, or refuse it. Read this way, the line becomes a call for lucidity. If our fellow men and we ourselves are enough to create guilt and punishment, then we must watch carefully how we use that power. Do we punish to uphold dignity or to crush? Do we feel guilt as a reminder to act better, or do we let it consume us uselessly? Do we use judgment to build community or to exile others from it? Camus presses us to be conscious of the mechanics of guilt, lest we become its slaves. So in this short, stark sentence, Camus strips away divine drama and leaves us with a more sobering truth. We do not need God to judge us. We are already judged by our neighbors, by our societies, by ourselves. And perhaps the greatest task of revolt is to live lucidly in that knowledge, to refuse unnecessary shame, to resist unjust punishments, and to carry only the guilt that leads us back to honesty. You know what charm is. A way of getting the answer yes, without having asked any clear question. It is as much a definition as it is a jab. Camus here dismantles the mystique of charm, stripping it of romance and presenting it as a subtle trick. Charm, he says, is not magic, not aura, not beauty. It is persuasion disguised as innocence. The charmer never asks outright, never risks rejection, by making the demand plain. Instead, they create an atmosphere in which yes comes unbidden, offered almost before the listener realizes they have surrendered. The wit of this line is in its clarity. Charm is not about transparency. It is about ambiguity. The question is never clearly posed, and so the answer is never clearly chosen. Yes appears as if it were free, but it is in fact elicited by suggestion, tone, presence. The charmer floats possibilities into the air until the other person breathes them in. There is humor here, but also suspicion. Camus knows how easily charm can slide into manipulation. By refusing to state a question, the charmer avoids accountability. What was promised? Nothing concrete. What was agreed to? Nothing explicit. And yet, the yes is extracted. In this way, charm becomes a kind of soft coercion, more dangerous perhaps, because it feels pleasant. This insight belongs not only to the sphere of love or seduction, but to politics, to business, to everyday life. Leaders rely on charm as much as lovers do. Promises are implied but not spoken, responsibility blurred. Citizens or followers say yes, nodding along, believing they have chosen freely. But the question was never fully asked. The consent is ambiguous, and that ambiguity is where power hides. At the same time, Camus is not denying that charm can be delightful. He understood human interactions too well to reduce everything to manipulation. Charm, when used playfully, can be part of the art of connection. It creates an atmosphere of lightness, of laughter, of complicity. The danger is when charm becomes a substitute for honesty. For Camus, lucidity, living without lies, demands that we notice when charm is at work, and whether it is leading us toward authenticity or away from it. The sentence is sly because it forces us to recognize ourselves in it. Who among us has not used charm in this way? A smile that asks without asking, a joke that suggests without declaring, a silence that invites agreement. Camus does not condemn us for it. He simply names it, and in naming it, removes its mystique. Charm is not magic, it is a technique, and like any technique, it can be wielded for connection or for manipulation. By defining charm so bluntly, Camus reminds us of his larger project to strip away illusions. We like to think of charm as irresistible, natural, mysterious, but he reduces it to its mechanics. Ambiguity producing assent. The spell is broken, but what remains is perhaps more interesting. We can now see charm not as enchantment, but as artifice, something we can analyze, resist, or choose to enjoy knowingly. You know what charm is, he begins, as though speaking conspiratorially, with a wink. He assumes we do know, because we've all seen it, used it, fallen for it. By finishing the thought so sharply, he exposes the game we were already playing, and once exposed, we can never see charm the same way again. The aim of art, the aim of a life, can only be to increase the sum of freedom and responsibility to be found in every man and in the world. This line reads like a charter, a declaration of purpose. Camus refuses to separate art from ethics, or life from responsibility. Both, he insists, must be measured not by beauty alone, nor by success, nor by survival, but by whether they enlarge freedom, and whether they bind that freedom with responsibility. To live well and to create well is not to escape the world, but to enrich it. First, freedom. For Camus, freedom is not the absence of constraint, but the possibility of choice. It is the widening of horizons, the opening of space, where the individual can breathe, speak, create, and act without chains. Art contributes to this, when it gives voice to the silenced, when it awakens imagination, when it resists tyranny. Life contributes, when it resists fear, when it refuses to submit to oppression, when it affirms the dignity of choice in daily actions. Every act, artistic or personal, should be weighed by this question: does it increase freedom? But Camus is too wary of illusions to stop there. Freedom without responsibility, he knows, collapses into chaos or cruelty. To be free is not simply to do what one likes. It is to recognize the consequences of one's actions, to care for others, to respect limits. That is why he pairs freedom with responsibility. True art does not simply glorify the self, it bears responsibility toward the community. True living does not simply assert liberty, it shoulders the duty of solidarity. The balance is crucial. Ideologies throughout history have failed by severing freedom from responsibility. Some exalted freedom at the expense of others, turning liberty into license for domination. Others exalted responsibility at the expense of freedom, demanding sacrifice in the name of the state, the party, or God. Camus refuses both extremes. He wants a world where art and life expand freedom, but never at the cost of our duty to one another. This principle also reveals why Camus himself wrote the way he did. His novels are not propaganda. They do not dictate solutions. They create space for reflection, for lucidity, for readers to confront their own truths. That is art serving freedom. At the same time, his works resist nihilism. They do not revel in despair, but insist on solidarity, decency, revolt. That is art serving responsibility. His style embodies his ethic, clarity and honesty, in service to both freedom and duty. The line also applies to the individual life. Each of us has the capacity to shrink or enlarge the freedom of those around us. Every act can be selfish or generous, blind or lucid, destructive or constructive. Camus's challenge is to live so that the sum total of freedom and responsibility in the world grows. That is the measure of meaning, not an afterlife, not an eternal truth, but the tangible effect of our choices on human dignity. So the line reads like a compass. It directs artists, thinkers, citizens, and ordinary people alike. If your work, your words, your actions enlarge freedom and responsibility, they are worthwhile. If they diminish them, no beauty or efficiency can redeem them. In a century scarred by ideologies that enslaved in the name of liberation and by art that often escaped into detachment, Camus's manifesto remains urgent. The aim of art, the aim of life, is not escape. It is contribution to widen the circle of freedom, to deepen the practice of responsibility, to ensure that the fragile dignity of human beings has more space to breathe. One does not decide the truth of a thought according to whether it is right-wing or left-wing. It sounds obvious, almost banal, until you realize how rarely we live by it. In politics, in philosophy, in everyday debate, we constantly decide the worth of an idea, not by its content, but by its label. Is it ours or theirs? Is it right-wing or left-wing? If it comes from the enemy camp, it is dismissed. If it comes from our own, it is praised. Camus refuses this reflex. Truth, he insists, does not bend to party lines. The statement is crisp, cutting, almost mathematical in its neutrality. Truth is not partisan. The universe does not change its laws because of ideology. Human dignity does not alter when claimed by one flag or another. A murdered child is not more innocent if killed by one side than by the other. Camus watched his century drown in ideological slaughter, fascism, communism, nationalism, all claiming exclusive rights to truth. He saw the corruption that follows when truth is judged not by what it is, but by who speaks it. His line is polemical because it attacks our deepest tribal instinct. We like to belong. We like to know who is with us and who is against us. It is easier to sort thoughts into camps than to examine them honestly. Camus demands more. He demands lucidity, weigh each idea on its own, without prejudice, without allegiance. The discipline is hard because it strips away the comfort of ideology, but it is necessary because without it, we fall into the hypocrisy of defending cruelty when it comes from our side and condemning it when it comes from the other. Camus is not saying that right and left are meaningless. He is saying they are insufficient. They are orientations, not verdicts. They cannot tell us whether a thought is true, only where it happens to be positioned in political geography. To equate truth with allegiance is to betray both truth and politics. It is to allow loyalty to substitute for clarity. This line also expresses Camus's solitude. As a thinker, he was attacked by the right as a leftist, and by the left as a traitor. He supported justice, but refused terror. He supported liberty, but refused oppression. He refused to excuse murder on either side. For this, he was often isolated, but his isolation was the price of his commitment to truth above ideology. His sentence is less an abstract principle than a confession of his own position. Unwilling to surrender to camps, he stood alone in lucidity. The polemical force of the line is still urgent today. We still divide ideas by allegiance. We still dismiss arguments because of who speaks them. We still cling to tribes that value loyalty over truth. Camus's challenge is to resist this reflex, to develop the harder habit of examining each claim on its own. It is a demand for intellectual honesty in an age of slogans. So when Camus says, one does not decide the truth of a thought according to whether it is right-wing or left-wing, he is not merely being contrarian. He is calling us back to the core of philosophy, to seek truth wherever it appears, to resist the comfort of camps, to refuse the laziness of labels. It is a call for courage, because it means risking the loneliness of standing outside the tribe. But for Camus, that loneliness is the price of integrity. Mistaken ideas always end in bloodshed, but in every case, it is someone else's blood. The line lands like a charge sheet, crisp and damning. Camus accuses not only individuals, but entire systems of thought. History, he says, is littered with corpses sacrificed to abstractions. Ideologies, whether religious, political, or philosophical, are rarely paid for by those who invent them. The theorist in his study, the prophet in his pulpit, the politician at his podium, these are not the ones who bleed. It is others, the soldiers, the workers, the civilians caught between armies, the nameless buried in mass graves. This is why the line stings like cross-examination. Camus forces us to confront the hypocrisy at the heart of many lofty ideas. Those who design them speak of justice, destiny, salvation. But when those ideas fail, or when they demand sacrifice, it is never their own lives they place on the altar. They demand blood, but not their own. Camus lived through this firsthand. Fascism, communism, colonialism, all promised liberation or renewal. Each excused violence in the name of necessity, history, progress, and each time it was the innocent who paid. Camus does not deny the importance of ideas. He denies their right to cost lives when the price is always borne by others. He will not allow intellectuals or politicians to wash their hands of responsibility. Ideas, when mistaken, are not harmless errors. They are lethal. The structure of the sentence itself is prosecutorial. Always, and in every case, leave no escape clause. Camus is not saying often, he is saying always. Every mistaken idea that tries to impose itself on the world, every abstraction that demands obedience, sooner or later ends in violence. This is not a possibility, it is a pattern. And the someone else is the twist of the knife. The reminder that cowardice is built into ideology when it refuses to risk its own skin. There is also an ethical demand hidden here. If you believe something strongly enough to risk others' lives for it, you must be willing to risk your own. Otherwise, your belief is not conviction, but exploitation. Camus himself refused to endorse violence lightly. He resisted both the justifications of revolutionary terror and the complacency of status quo cruelty. His ethic of measure was born from this conviction. No idea, however noble, can justify the blood of innocents. The courtroom voice of the line still resonates today. We see the same pattern repeated. Wars launched for security, policies enacted for progress, violence justified by faith or identity. The leaders speak of necessity, but it is others who die. Camus would call this by its name, cowardice disguised as philosophy. And yet, the line is not only condemnation, it is also a challenge. It forces us to examine our own ideas, our own loyalties. Do we hold beliefs that, if enacted, would demand sacrifices we ourselves are not willing to make? Do we tolerate abstractions that quietly crush others in our name? Camus's philosophy demands lucidity here too. If we cannot accept the blood price personally, we must not endorse it collectively. So this sentence becomes both an indictment and a warning. Mistaken ideas are not just wrong, they are dangerous. They do not remain in books. They spill into streets, and the innocent pay. Camus, with his relentless clarity, refuses to let us forget that. Philosophy, for him, is not a game of words. It is a matter of life and death. Perhaps we cannot prevent this world from being a world in which children are tortured, but we can reduce the number of tortured children. It is one of Camus's darkest recognitions, and one of his most humane demands. He does not offer comfort here. He does not pretend evil can be erased. The world, he admits, may always contain cruelty, injustice, and suffering. Children, the most innocent, may still be broken by violence. To deny this would be to lie, and Camus refuses lies, but he also refuses despair. If we cannot abolish cruelty, we can limit it. If we cannot stop all suffering, we can at least reduce it. The measure of our humanity lies in that effort. The line captures Camus's ethic of limits. He mistrusted ideologies that promised utopia, a paradise without suffering. Such promises, he saw, always demanded blood today, for the sake of tomorrow. They excused cruelty in the name of future perfection. But Camus prefers a humbler, more honest path. Accept that the world will never be perfect, and work tirelessly to make it less cruel. Not everything, but something. Not all at once, but step by step. There is tragedy in his phrasing. Perhaps we cannot prevent. The word perhaps leaves open a sliver of hope, but the realism dominates. Camus will not indulge in fantasies of complete redemption. He knows history. Wars erupt, tyrannies rise, ideologies crush the innocent, and yet even here, he clings to the responsibility of reduction. To prevent one child's suffering, to spare even a few, that is meaning enough. This vision is both sobering and empowering. It strips away the grandiosity of saving the world and replaces it with concrete, immediate responsibility. What can you do here today to reduce suffering? It might be small, a gesture of kindness, an act of solidarity, resistance to cruelty. But those small acts matter. They are how we revolt against the absurd, not with illusions, but with decency. Camus' focus on children sharpens the moral weight. Children embody innocence, vulnerability, the future itself. To harm them is to reveal the bankruptcy of any system that claims to defend humanity. By invoking children, Camus reminds us that the test of any philosophy, any politics, is not its slogans or ideals, but its treatment of the most defenseless. If your vision of justice allows for the torture of children, it has already failed. There is also a quiet universality here. We cannot agree on metaphysics, on ideologies, on histories, but who can deny the imperative to reduce the suffering of children? Camus appeals to what binds us beyond doctrine, compassion. His ethic of limits finds its anchor here. We need no divine law to tell us this is wrong. Our shared humanity is enough, and yet the line is not sentimental. It is spoken in full awareness of evil's persistence. That is what makes it so powerful. Camus does not lull us into believing we can fix everything. He tells us plainly, you will not, but you must still act, because to act is to affirm dignity against absurdity. The struggle will never be finished, but it must always be begun. So this sentence becomes both lament and command. It laments that the world contains such horrors, and likely always will. But it commands us not to give in to despair. We may not prevent all suffering, but we can prevent some. That is enough to make the effort sacred. Camus leaves us here with the clearest moral compass, not utopia, not perfection, but the reduction of unnecessary pain, especially for the most innocent among us. We have exiled beauty. The Greeks took up arms for her. The line begins like an accusation. We have exiled beauty, not misplaced it, not forgotten it, but exiled it, as though it were dangerous, unwelcome, something to be pushed to the margins. Camus suggests that modern civilization, with its obsession for efficiency, progress, and ideology, has pushed beauty out of its central place in human life. It is no longer our compass. It is an afterthought, a luxury, a decoration. In contrast, he points to the Greeks, who once understood beauty as sacred, essential, even worth dying for. They took up arms for her. They defended her as a principle of life. The contrast is deliberately jarring. In Camus's time, scarred by world wars, totalitarian systems, and technological barbarism, beauty was often dismissed as trivial compared to power or survival. Governments and ideologies spoke of justice, progress, history, revolution, but rarely of beauty. Beauty was treated as indulgence in the face of crisis. Camus refuses this dismissal. He argues that beauty is not ornamental, but foundational. Without it, life becomes machinery, efficient, brutal, colorless. The Greeks, in his imagination, embodied another way of living. Their tragedies, their temples, their philosophy, their art, all expressed a civilization that wove beauty into its very order. For them, beauty was bound to truth and goodness, inseparable from dignity. To attack beauty was to attack life itself. That is why Camus claims they would defend it with arms. Beauty was not exiled. It was honored, defended, celebrated. In saying, "We have exiled beauty," Camus is also diagnosing a moral poverty. We pursue power, ideology, economic growth, technological conquest, but we neglect the simple radiance of the world: sunlight, sea, art, friendship, love. We live as if efficiency mattered more than radiance, as if progress mattered more than presence. The result, he suggests, is a civilization that may be powerful, but is also hollow, one that can dominate the earth, but not nourish the soul. There is both admiration and lament in his sentence. Admiration for the Greeks, who saw beauty as sacred, lament for modern humanity, which treats it as distraction. He is not nostalgic, not asking us to return to antiquity, but to remember what has been lost. Beauty is not an accessory to justice or truth. It is their companion. To exile, it is to exile part of what makes us human. This line also reveals Camus's personal creed. For him, beauty is not luxury, it is resistance. To affirm beauty in the face of absurdity is to rebel. To enjoy a sunset, even while knowing the world is indifferent, is to defy despair. To create art, to love a landscape, to cherish a fleeting moment. These are acts of revolt against meaninglessness. Beauty gives us measure, proportion, joy without illusion. So when Camus says, "We have exiled beauty," the Greeks took up arms for her, he is not merely making an aesthetic point. He is making a political and moral one. He is asking, what do we fight for today? Power, efficiency, abstract causes that sacrifice the living? Or do we fight, as the Greeks did, for what makes life worth living, for the radiance of beauty, which binds us to truth, to decency, to joy? His answer is implicit. We must bring beauty back from exile, not as ornament, but as necessity. For without beauty, revolt has no song, freedom has no shape, life has no celebration. And a world without celebration is not worth defending. We turn our backs on nature. We are ashamed of beauty. Our wretched tragedies have a smell of the office clinging to them. This line is as scathing as it is mournful. Camus sketches a portrait of modern humanity as creatures who no longer look at the sea or the sky, who no longer bow before beauty, but who drown instead in paperwork, fluorescent light, and the stale air of offices. We have, he says, turned our backs on nature, as if ashamed of it, as if embarrassed by its grandeur, and in doing so, we have reduced our tragedies to bureaucratic melodramas, Even our suffering smells like an office. The satire bites hardest at the phrase ashamed of beauty. What does it mean to be ashamed of beauty? It means we feel awkward in its presence. A sunset embarrasses us. It seems sentimental to notice. A flower makes us scoff. It's just a flower. A landscape feels frivolous compared to the serious business of productivity. We treat beauty as indulgence, something childish, something unworthy of serious people. But Camus reminds us that this attitude is not wisdom, it is poverty. To be ashamed of beauty is to be ashamed of what sustains us. The line also critiques our tragedies. Once, tragedy belonged to the Greeks, who staged myths of gods and heroes under open skies. Their tragedies were cosmic, vast, concerned with fate and freedom. Ours, Camus says, are wretched, and they smell of the office. We write tragedies about bureaucracy, about petty ambition, about sterile institutions. Even when we suffer, our suffering feels shrunken, beige, diminished by routine. Instead of facing the gods, we face filing cabinets. This is satire, but it is also lament. Camus does not despise the office worker. He despises the reduction of life to nothing but office work. He despises a world where beauty is exiled in the name of seriousness, where nature is neglected in the name of progress, where tragedy has been replaced by paperwork. His words sting because they ring true. How many of our modern crises feel like administrative breakdowns, tragedies mediated by policies, statistics, forms? Yet beneath the mockery lies a call. Camus is urging us to return to nature, not in nostalgia, but in necessity. To remember that beauty is not indulgence, but nourishment. To recall that tragedy, if it is to be meaningful, must be more than bureaucratic drama. It must speak to the human condition against the backdrop of the world. Without nature, without beauty, our lives shrink to the dimensions of offices, our dramas to paperwork, our imagination to ledgers. Camus himself never forgot the sea, the light, the vast Algerian landscapes. For him, they were not escape, but measure, reminders of proportion, of radiance, of what mattered. Beauty was not frivolous. It was resistance. To turn our backs on it, as he accuses modernity of doing, is to impoverish our lives and to cheapen our tragedies. So this line, half sneer, half sigh, becomes a challenge to us. Will we keep our faces buried in offices, ashamed of beauty, reducing life to paperwork? Or will we turn again to the world, to sun and sea, to mountains and fields, and remember that beauty is part of our dignity? For Camus, the choice is urgent. Without beauty, our tragedies are small and sterile. With beauty, even our suffering can regain grandeur. Our technical civilization has just reached its greatest level of savagery. We will have to choose between collective suicide and the intelligent use of our scientific conquests. This is Camus as prophet, his voice sharpened by history. The Second World War had ended with the mushroom cloud, proof that humanity's genius for invention could annihilate itself in a flash. The marvels of science, once thought to guarantee progress, had culminated not in liberation, but in mass death. Hence his chilling declaration, technical civilization has reached savagery. The tools meant to uplift us have become weapons to destroy us. The sentence begins with recognition, not illusion. Civilization does not necessarily mean refinement. Progress in knowledge does not guarantee progress in morality. The 20th century made this plain. The same century that split the atom also built gas chambers. For Camus, this is the paradox of modernity. We are more powerful than ever and more vulnerable than ever because our power has outrun our wisdom. From this recognition comes the stark choice: collective suicide or intelligent use. The phrase collective suicide is not hyperbole. Camus means it literally. With nuclear weapons, with chemical warfare, with machines capable of destruction on a planetary scale, humanity possesses the tools to end itself. If we continue blindly, if we let ideologies drive us into conflict, the result is extinction. The danger is not hypothetical, it is imminent. But Camus refuses despair. He insists on the possibility of intelligent use. The intelligence here does not mean mere technical mastery. It means wisdom, restraint, proportion, the ethical use of science. Science, in itself, is not evil. What matters is how we wield it. But will we use it to heal, to create, to extend dignity? Or will we let it be harnessed by ideologies that demand blood? The future hangs on this choice. Notice the structure of the line. It is not a prediction, but a demand. We will have to choose. The decision is not automatic. There is no law of history that ensures survival or doom. It depends on us, our courage, our lucidity, our solidarity. Camus places the burden squarely on human responsibility. We cannot blame fate or God if we destroy ourselves. The weapons are ours. The choice is ours. The prophetic tone is sharpened by simplicity. He does not dress the choice in abstractions, suicide or intelligent use, death or life, madness or measure. In this clarity, Camus calls us to revolt, not only against injustice, but against annihilation itself. He expands his philosophy of revolt from the personal to the planetary. To live without illusions now means to live in full knowledge that our civilization can end in one mistake, and to resist that outcome with everything we have. For us today, the line remains urgent. The forms of savagery may shift, climate collapse, artificial intelligence, bioweapons, but the logic is the same. Our technical capacity has outrun our ethical capacity. The danger is still collective suicide. The task is still intelligent use. Camus's voice echoes across decades, reminding us that progress without wisdom is destruction disguised as triumph. So the line is not only prophecy, it is plea. A plea for measure, for humility, for responsibility equal to our power. A plea to remember that civilization is not judged by its tools, but by its humanity. And a plea to choose, because the time for choice is always now. Before the terrifying prospects now available to humanity, we see even more clearly that peace is the only goal worth struggling for. Camus writes this in The Shadow of the Bomb. In the aftermath of wars that scarred continents, by terrifying prospects, he means the possibility of total annihilation. The fact that our technical genius has given us weapons powerful enough to erase entire cities in seconds. Humanity now lives with the knowledge that it can end itself. In such a context, he says, the conclusion is obvious. All other goals shrink beside peace. The line is calm, but its calmness hides urgency. Camus does not thunder like a preacher. He speaks with quiet clarity, as if the truth were self-evident. He is not naive. He knows that power, ideology, nationalism, and greed still tempt us into violence. But he insists that once we have seen what is possible, collective suicide through our own inventions, everything else must be subordinated to peace, justice, progress, freedom, beauty. All depend on survival. Without peace, there is no ground for any of them. There is humility in this recognition. For centuries, humanity has treated war as inevitable, even noble. Nations glorified it, poets romanticized it, leaders justified it. Camus strips away that illusion. In the age of atomic weapons, war is not a path to glory, but to extinction. We can no longer afford the old rhetoric of sacrifice. The stakes are higher. The only struggle that matters is the struggle to prevent total destruction. And yet, peace for Camus is not passive. It is not mere absence of war. It is an active goal, something to be fought for with the same energy once devoted to conquest. It requires vigilance, courage, solidarity. It demands that we resist ideologies that sacrifice the living for abstract futures, that we refuse leaders who disguise aggression as necessity. To struggle for peace is to struggle for life itself, not in the abstract, but in the daily concrete sense, protecting families, communities, children from the machinery of annihilation. The tone of the sentence is resolute because Camus will not let us off with excuses. He rejects the fatalism that says war is inevitable, that violence is part of human nature. Perhaps war was inevitable in the past, he admits, but in the present, With the tools of mass destruction in our hands, we must rise above that fatalism, or perish by it. Fatalism now is suicide. Notice also his phrasing, the only goal worth struggling for. He does not say, peace is one among many important goals. He says it is the only one that matters under these terrifying prospects. He is drawing a hierarchy. Until peace is secured, other goals cannot stand. It is a radical simplification of values, clarity forced upon us by danger. For us today, the line resonates beyond nuclear fear. Climate collapse, pandemics, weapons of mass technology, each presents terrifying prospects. Camus's wisdom is still urgent. Before these threats, the central goal is survival with dignity. Peace, in his sense, is not just absence of war. It is the preservation of conditions for life. So his sentence reads as a manifesto, written in soft ink, clear, calm, undeniable. In the face of terrifying prospects, only peace is worth the fight. Not empire, not ideology, not domination. Peace. And to struggle for it is not weakness, but the highest form of strength. The only strength that can secure the fragile, finite gift of life. Outside of that single fatality of death, everything, joy or happiness, is liberty. This is Camus, at his most life-affirming. Death is the one boundary that cannot be crossed, the single inevitability no philosophy or science can dissolve. But aside from that solitary fatality, everything else, every taste of joy, every flicker of happiness, is freedom. It is as though he is telling us, once you accept death, once you stop fearing it or disguising it, the whole field of life opens before you as possibility. The sentence sings with rebellion. So often, we let ourselves be imprisoned by invented boundaries, by conventions, by authority, by fear of judgment, by the desire for approval, but Camus brushes these away. The only true wall is death. Everything else is negotiable, flexible, subject to our freedom. To laugh, to love, to create, to walk into the sunlight. These are liberties available to us because we are alive. No ideology, no system, no false destiny should convince us otherwise. There is joy in the phrasing. He could have said, outside of death, everything is possible, but he doesn't. He says everything is liberty. He frames life not only as possibility, but as permission. You are free to delight, free to suffer meaningfully, free to revolt, free to savor. Happiness itself is liberty because it is not guaranteed by the world. It must be seized, claimed, chosen. This line also shows how Camus grounds freedom in finitude. Death limits us, but in limiting us, it makes liberty urgent. If life were eternal, freedom might dissolve into indifference. But because time is short, each act of joy becomes a declaration. I am free now, even if only for this hour. Death's inevitability makes happiness sharper. Far from crushing liberty, it makes liberty precious. There is a celebratory defiance in this stance. Many philosophies treat death as the supreme tragedy, the enemy to be overcome by gods, afterlives, or metaphysical escapes. Camus insists otherwise. Death is simply the condition of life, the one border we cannot move, but within that border we are free. Even the absurd, the silence of the world, the lack of ultimate meaning, becomes the soil of liberty. We are not bound by cosmic orders. We are unbound to choose, to act, to create joy where none is guaranteed. Think of how this plays out in the ordinary. To sip wine with friends, to feel wind on your face, to finish a page of writing, to walk beneath the night sky. Each of these is liberty, precisely because they are not compelled. They are not written in the stars. They are chosen, claimed against the silence. Camus wants us to recognize these moments for what they are. Small rebellions, small victories, tiny declarations of freedom. And here lies the celebratory power of the sentence. Life does not need to be justified by eternal meaning. It needs only to be lived in freedom. Moment by moment, joy by joy, death will come. That much is certain. But until then, we are free. Not free from necessity, not free from suffering, but free to affirm, to revolt, to delight. So the line becomes a hymn. Outside of death, everything else is liberty. Everything else, joy, struggle, love, beauty, belongs to the field of freedom. If we have the courage to accept mortality, we can live as if every moment were ours to shape. And that, Camus suggests, is enough to fill the heart. A novel is never anything but a philosophy put into images. With this sentence, Camus lifts the curtain on his craft. He is telling us how he writes, and more broadly, what literature is for. A novel, he insists, is not just a story. It is philosophy, but disguised, incarnated in scenes, characters, and images, where abstract thought appeals to the intellect. The novel speaks to the senses. It takes ideas that might seem dry on the page of an essay and gives them flesh, breath, and motion. Consider The Stranger. Philosophically, it is an exploration of the absurd, the clash between our hunger for meaning and the world's silence. But Camus does not lecture about absurdity there. He shows it. He gives us Meursault, a man who does not play by society's rules of emotion, who reports his mother's death with indifference, who is condemned not only for murder, but for failing to pretend. Through Meursault, we see the absurd. The philosophy is present, but in images: a blazing sun, a courtroom, a man smoking in his cell. This is what Camus means. Philosophy clothed in images becomes experience. The reader is not told what the absurd is. The reader feels it. Philosophy here is not distant or abstract. It is intimate, lived. Camus understood that arguments alone rarely move people. Stories do. Images linger in memory longer than syllogisms. A single scene, the moment Meursault shoots under the scorching sun, captures the absurd better than pages of theory could. But the sentence also sets Camus apart from novelists who insist on pure storytelling. For him, art cannot be separated from truth. A novel without philosophical weight risks becoming entertainment only. Conversely, philosophy without images risks becoming lifeless. The two must fuse. He does not want philosophy that floats above life, nor novels that drift without thought. He wants both: thought incarnate, story illuminated by ideas. There is a humility in this view too. By calling novels philosophy put into images, he admits that ideas need embodiment. Philosophy, naked, is insufficient. It must descend into the world of sights, sounds, gestures, and silences. That descent is not a dilution, but a completion. Philosophy comes alive when it inhabits characters and conflicts. This insight also helps explain the texture of Camus's prose. His writing is famously clear, stripped of ornament, yet rich in images. He wanted his novels to be accessible, direct, immediate. Philosophy, when put into images, must not hide behind jargon. It must strike the reader as plainly as a blazing sky or a plague sweeping through a city. His style is thus an ethical choice. Clarity honors the reader, just as clarity honors truth. The line also rebukes the arrogance of pure systems. Philosophers often claim certainty, spinning theories of justice, history, or meaning. Camus mistrusted such certainties. Novels, by contrast, expose ambiguity. They show us not conclusions, but conflicts, not doctrines, but dilemmas. By putting philosophy into images, Camus keeps it honest, tethered to the messiness of lived experience. So when he writes, a novel is never anything but a philosophy put into images, Camus is both confessing his method and defining art's task. A novel that lacks thought is trivial. A philosophy that lacks images is sterile, but together they can awaken us, the mind and the senses engaged at once, the idea embodied in life. There is always a philosophy for lack of courage. Camus strikes like a prosecutor here. He looks at the history of thought and sees not just brilliance, but evasion. Time and again, whenever reality proves too sharp, too unbearable, someone invents a philosophy to dull the edge. cowardice, dressed up in doctrine. Fear, translated into system. What cannot be faced is renamed, reinterpreted, excused. The world is stripped of its rawness and wrapped in consolation. Camus has no patience for it. Think of the philosophies that leap beyond the human condition into transcendence. Life is painful? Then say life is only a passage to eternity. Death is terrifying? Then claim death is not real, that the soul persists forever. Injustice is unbearable? Then declare that divine judgment will set it right in the end. Each system answers not the truth of the world, but the fear of the thinker. The philosophy is less discovery than disguise. Camus calls this out because he sees how dangerous it becomes. Cowardice disguised as philosophy seduces the weary, lulls the despairing, consoles the fearful, but it also excuses cruelty. How many wars have been fought under the banner of philosophies that promised ultimate meaning? How many tyrannies have justified their bloodshed with doctrines claiming to know the truth of history or destiny? Behind the rhetoric lies fear, the fear of living without guarantees. Lacking courage to accept the absurd, thinkers invent philosophies that pretend to dissolve it. And those illusions, once systematized, become lethal. The scorn in the sentence is deliberate. Camus despises cowardice, precisely because it masquerades as wisdom. A coward admits fear. A coward with a philosophy denies it and calls it truth. The result is dishonesty, elevated to principle. Against this, Camus pits his ethic of lucidity. He demands we face the absurd squarely, without escape routes. Life has no ultimate meaning? Accept it. Death is final? Accept it. Injustice will not be magically repaired? Accept it, and resist it here and now. To invent a philosophy that denies these truths is not depth, but avoidance. This is not to say Camus rejects philosophy altogether. He does not. He respects thought, but only when it springs from courage, from the willingness to face reality as it is, without illusions. Philosophy, for him, must be a confrontation, not an evasion. It must clear our vision, not blur it. When philosophy arises from cowardice, it obscures. When it arises from courage, it illuminates. The line also applies to our everyday lives. How often do we justify our avoidance with elaborate reasoning? We tell ourselves stories to excuse our inaction, our compromises, our fears. It's not the right time. The system won't change. This is just how things are. Each story is a philosophy for lack of courage. Camus would strip these away and leave us face to face with the real demand. Act, revolt, live, without waiting for permission from illusions. There is always a philosophy for lack of courage. It is both accusation and warning. Philosophy can be noble, but it can also be cowardice in disguise. Camus's challenge is to examine which it is. Are our ideas born of lucidity or of fear? Do they face the absurd or flee from it? His scorn is meant to wake us, to keep us from mistaking avoidance for depth. For Camus, the highest courage is to live without consolations, and the only philosophy worth keeping is one that teaches us how. In the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer. Camus has returned to this line more than once, and with good reason. It is not only a metaphor, it is a discovery, something that feels like it belongs more to a diary than a treatise. He is not making a universal law here. He is recounting something he realized about himself, something fragile, almost secret. Even when life closes in, even when cold surrounds him, there is a part of him that refuses to freeze. In the midst of winter, those words carry weight. Winter here is not just a season, but a state of being, illness, grief, exile. The sense that the world is silent and hostile. These are winters of the soul. Camus knew them intimately. Tuberculosis threatened his life when he was young. War and occupation shadowed his adulthood. He was no stranger to despair. And yet, even then, he discovered something in himself that astonished him. A warmth that could not be extinguished. That warmth he names summer, and not just any summer, an invincible one. It is not the summer of naive optimism, not the carefree warmth of those who have never known loss. It is a summer that persists precisely because it has been tested by winter. It is inner resilience, an instinct for joy that endures despite everything. The tone here feels almost confessional. One imagines Camus writing late at night, after a long day, trying to put into words why he has not collapsed under the weight of absurdity. He is admitting, quietly, there is something in me that does not give up. It does not come from God, nor from ideology, nor from false hope. It comes from within, from memory, from the body's stubborn love of life, from the way beauty imprints itself so deeply that even darkness cannot erase it. The phrase also captures his philosophy of revolt in miniature. To revolt is not to deny winter, but to affirm summer within it. It is to accept that life is harsh, absurd, often cruel, and still to refuse despair. The invincible summer is revolt internalized. It is the proof that even when nothing outside us justifies hope, we can still find warmth and strength within. But Camus never pretends this discovery is easy. The line's beauty lies in its tension, winter and summer coexisting. To admit the summer within is also to admit the winter outside. Both are real, both must be faced. The summer is not escape, it is resistance. It is what allows us to endure winters without illusions, without collapsing into nothingness. For the reader, the line resonates because it feels like a private gift. It whispers that even when the world is cold, there may be something inside that does not freeze. We may not notice it until we are tested, until the winter comes. But once we discover it, it can never be taken from us. It is not invincible in the sense of triumphant, but in the sense of enduring, refusing to be extinguished. So Camus's diary-like confession becomes our own possibility. To live lucidly, without illusions, is to know winter. To live rebelliously, without despair, is to discover summer within. And if we can carry that summer through the cold, then we have found something greater than comfort. We have found resilience, dignity, and a reason to go on. Autumn is a second spring, when every leaf is a flower. Few sentences capture Camus's painterly sensibility more than this. He does not write like a logician here, but like an artist, turning perception itself into philosophy. Autumn, the season of decline, of falling leaves, of shorter days, he refuses to see only as loss. Instead, he reframes it. Each leaf, drying, glowing red or gold, is not a sign of death, but a kind of blossom. The season of ending becomes a second flowering. This perspective belongs to someone who looks closely, who lingers in the details. Camus does not reduce autumn to a symbol of mortality. He notices how the leaves flare with color, how the light sharpens, how the air carries a different clarity. He writes with a painter's eye. The reds and oranges blaze against the gray of sky. The yellows scatter like petals along the ground. To call them flowers is not metaphor alone. It is the act of seeing beauty where others see only decay. The tone is intimate, as if he were sketching in a notebook during a walk. You can imagine him stopping by a tree in Algiers, the Mediterranean light slanting across its branches, marveling at how decline can glow so brightly. This is not philosophy invented in a study. It is philosophy born from looking, from attention, from refusing to let beauty go unnoticed. But the line is not only about aesthetics, it is about how we interpret change, loss, and aging. Most of us fear autumn, in nature and in life. It signals the end of growth, the approach of winter, the thinning of vitality. Camus challenges us to see differently. What if decline itself holds radiance? What if endings carry their own blossoms? A wrinkled face can hold the beauty of a second spring, marked not by youth, but by experience. A life nearing its winter may still burn with color. There is rebellion here too, against cultures that worship only beginnings, only youth, only growth. Camus insists on honoring what comes after. Autumn is not failure. It is another season of flowering. To exile beauty only to spring is to misunderstand life. True lucidity recognizes beauty in ripeness, in transience, in the glory of things that fade. In his philosophy of the absurd, this way of seeing is essential. The absurd tells us the world is indifferent, that decline is real, that death is certain. Camus does not deny this, but he insists we can still discover joy, not by escaping decline, but by noticing its strange blossoms. Autumn is the season of revolt against despair. It teaches us that even as things fall away, they can flare with beauty. So the line is more than a pretty metaphor. It is a discipline, a vision. To live well, Camus suggests, is to look at autumn, whether in trees, in years, or in oneself, and see not only the approach of winter, but the brilliance of a second spring. It is to refuse the lie that beauty belongs only to beginnings. It is to embrace the radiance of endings. And that is why this sentence lingers like a painting in words. It reminds us that philosophy is not only in books, but in seasons, in colors, in the act of noticing. Autumn, with its blazing leaves, is not just decline, it is a second spring, and if we train our eyes to see it that way, we may discover in endings a beauty that rivals beginnings. And that brings us to the end of the topic. 50 boring Camus quotes and ideas, each explained. If you've made it this far, take a second to breathe, because Camus's challenge is never just to listen or read, it's to live. These words are not museum pieces, they are demands. They ask us, will you live lucidly? Will you face the silence without illusions? Will you revolt, love, and create anyway? The absurd is waiting at every street corner, in every routine, in every late-night thought. Camus's reminder is that you don't need to conquer it. You only need to refuse despair, to find joy in defiance, to discover your own invincible summer, even in the midst of winter. That is your task, and no one else can do it for you. Thank you for spending this time with me. Seriously, it means a lot. If you found meaning in this journey, subscribe to this channel so we can keep exploring together. It costs you nothing, but it helps me more than you know. And now, I want to hear from you. Which Camus quote struck you the hardest? Which one felt like it was written about your life? Drop your answer in the comments. I'll be reading them, and I'd love to know which line made you pause, or maybe even change the way you see things. Because at the end of the day, philosophy is not about dusty books. It's about us. It's about how you and I face tomorrow. So wake up, look around, live, create, revolt. Don't wait for meaning to be handed down. Make it today.